here in this building, in this room. I wonder why. Okay. I've been joined by colleagues, the Honorables Councilmember Jose Rizar and Councilmember Kerkorian. We have a few items on the agenda today. As you can tell, the acoustics are not the best in this room. It's hard to decipher what people are saying because of the echo. So I just appreciate if you keep your conversations outside. This is the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, October 18th. And just a quick items. Housekeeping is, when you come to the microphone, give us your name and address. Try to speak into the microphone so we could hear you. Many of you have written eloquent letters. We welcome you to submit them. Sometimes we get caught up in reading what we wrote and we don't keep an eye on the clock. Time runs out and you didn't get to your main point. So hopefully you can get to your main point sooner than later. If you feel that the person before you has made your statement, it's okay to say, I agree with the previous speaker, but I have this much to add. And we can hear something different. We would appreciate that very much. So we have 3 items, and colleagues, there's a request that we can have public comment because there's 3 speakers that wanted to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, and they asked if I can take this out of our normal sequence of events, because I realize we have quite a few cards here and they are in a time crunch. Would you be okay with that, colleagues? So let's start with public comment first. We rarely do this. This is on items not on the agenda. So the public comment, folks that filled out public comment cards, I think there's 3 of them, like to come on up. That's Cynthia Brambila, Frank Tamoro, and Carolina Briones.
Yes, thank you so much. We appreciate that opportunity to speak. My name is Carolina Briones, and I'm a project director with LANE, LA Alliance for a New Economy, and we're here representing a coalition called the Alliance for Healthy and Responsible Grocery Stores. We are a coalition of over 30 organizations of community, faith, and labor leaders, and we're working to ensure that all communities throughout the city have access to responsible grocery stores and to the quality food and quality jobs that they can provide. Too many residents in our city live in food deserts. They struggle with a lack of healthy food options and a lack of good jobs, and which can be found at full-service grocery stores. So city policymakers can play a critical role in addressing this crisis. That's why we're here today. We want to let you know that this issue will be a major priority this fall and winter for each of the organizations in our alliance, and we'll be looking forward to engaging with each of you and your staff to explore the best way for the city to confront the problems of the grocery industry and lead the way to a healthier, thriving Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, come on up. Please give us your name and address.
Cynthia Brambila. I want to thank you with all my heart for your support during our recent contract fight. It was very important. We came close to a strike. It was important for us to see city leaders out there with us, standing for good jobs and against corporate greed. We were successful this year, but the fight goes on. The industry uses to be a stable provider of middle-class jobs, but now it's hard for us to get by with cuts to our hours and paychecks. The industry is shifting as corporators like Walmart pay poverty wages and don't offer affordable benefits. The rest of the companies are only too happy to use the threat as an agreement to cut benefits and pay. This is what happened in our negotiations. They aren't doing right by customers either. The major grocery retailers have ignored too many neighborhoods in Los Angeles. They can and must do better for residents and workers alike. With the allegations, the members of the UFCW are committed to make sure our industry meets the needs of Los Angeles in every neighborhood with good food and good jobs. Thank you again, and we look forward to continue this struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Hi, good afternoon. Frank Tamburello with Hunger Action Los Angeles, 961 South Mariposa. We're an advocacy organization against hunger and in favor of healthy eating. The grocery retail industry is currently failing Los Angeles. In wealthy areas, we have gleaming grocery stores competing for market share, while we have huge segments of the community with no access to any grocery store at all, and especially not to the kind of healthy, nutritious foods people need. The consequence of the lack of access to healthy food is a growing health crisis and jobs crisis in LA. For example, rates of teenage obesity in South LA are 8 times as high as in West LA, partly due to the lack of availability of fresh foods. And workers at grocery stores in East LA earn nearly $7,000 less than workers in West LA. And this affects people's ability to purchase the kind of food their families need. Poverty is a leading cause of nutrition problems. Opening full-service stores is an important part of addressing our food crisis, but we also need to pay attention to jobs, because I've worked with lots of different kinds of anti-hunger programs, and a good job is the best of all anti-hunger programs. That's why we urge you to work with us in supporting the development of good grocery stores that are also good employers. So we're supporting the Alliance for Healthy and Responsible Grocery Stores. We look forward to working closely with each of you over the coming months to address this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That closes public comment for general public comment. So, Roberto, can we start with item number 1? Please read that into the record.
Sure. Council members, item 1 is a motion corrects Krikorian. It's instructing the planning department to prepare an ordinance that will create a residential floor area overlay in the Beverly Grove area of the city, limiting the floor area ratio to 0.41.
Okay, do we have a quick overview from the staff on this?
Good afternoon, Kevin Keller, City Planning staff. This is a motion. I believe we have met with Council Office 5 on this, and we are aware and able to work with the Council Office on the details, but it's to be referred to the staff.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We do have some public comment cards on this item. Okay, where is it at? So the microphone would like to come on up. Barry Johnson, Barry Karras, Jason Edelman. Good afternoon, sir.
Barry Johnson, Studio City Residents Association board member, and I would just like to wish the residents of Beverly Grove the best of luck in doing an RFA for their area. In Studio City, we've spent the last 7.5 years trying to get one, and we're still awaiting a final city council vote. And I hope they, too, will be successful to have an RFA, so there will be more than just the Sunland Tahunga one in existence as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Hello, Barry Karras. I live at 6341 Drexel Avenue in the Beverly Grove area. I want to first commend the councilman. Contrary to some opinions on the other side, his survey was conducted with the utmost integrity. I've known Councilman Koretz for many years through the time he was working in the State Assembly, and this was done thoroughly and fairly. So I hope that you will understand that and take that into consideration. I live in a 1,900 square foot house. It's a 1930 Spanish house that is like a jewel to me. What's happening in the area is that developers are coming in and building houses that are 4,000 square feet high, big. Now, what this is, besides anything else, it is taking away the light and the air of the neighbors. So I have a neighbor across the street. There is a big modern box of a house that's been built, and the whole one side of his house has no light and no air coming through it because of it. I understand the need that families grow, that houses may be a little too small, but the councilman's ordinance raises the level to 3,000 square feet. So if I were to build a 1,000 square foot second story on my house, I would have 3,000 square feet. It's more than enough. And I don't understand the need for such large houses to be built and at the detriment to the neighbor's quality of life. My values, they say the values will go down if we don't allow this to happen, but the value of my house will go down if these big houses are built next door to it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jason Edelman.
Hi, I'm Jason Needleman. I live at 6640 West 5th Street in the Beverly Grove neighborhood. And I want to do a sort of a dog bites man thing and compliment our city councilman. I know that doesn't get covered much, but Paul Koretz has done an exceptional job here. Chris Kuntz, his planning deputy, has done an amazing job here. And it does happen that politicians are accountable to their constituents, serve their constituents, actually take the temperature of the neighborhood, and then attempt to legislate in the interests of their constituents. And that's what's happened here. So kudos to John Darnell, to Chris Kuntz, to Paul Koretz. If you guys get a chance to hire them away, I would try if I were in your position, and I will support those guys if they want to run for office at some point. This ordinance strikes the right balance between the rights of builders and the rights of residents. I'm here to speak in favor of the ordinance. When I moved into the Beverly Grove neighborhood 8 years ago, speculators were building oversized homes that were out of character with the neighborhood. And we've been working for years, a group of us in the neighborhood, along with first Jack Weiss and then Paul Koretz, to do something about that issue. We got an ordinance passed when Jack Weiss was our councilman. When Paul came in, he walked the neighborhood, noticed that the ordinance hadn't been completely effective, came to us and showed the initiative to take on this problem. He came with this proposal, which we're confident will actually address the issue, will strike that proper balance between builders and the neighborhood. He did a survey, very meticulously done. Some people criticize it, but the results of that survey show a supermajority of support for an ordinance, and the numbers are almost identical to the numbers in support of a similar proposal years before conducted by Jack Weiss. So there's a clear supermajority of support to do something about this issue in our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Susan Collette. Susan Collette, are you here? And then we'll hear from Councilmember Koretz's office, Christopher Kuntz. Good afternoon.
I live in the neighborhood as well, and we moved there 25 years ago, and then about 8 years ago we bought our current house after seeing that the neighbor, maybe it was longer actually, after seeing the neighborhood was stable and nothing was going to happen. And then all of a sudden the McMansions started getting built, and we just, feel like moving out of there and wish we'd moved, bought somewhere else.
You can speak into the microphone, I'll hear you better.
Oh, okay, sorry. Anyway, and I'd like to add on a couple points that Jason had said on the survey that the results apparently would have been even higher. It's a clear majority as it was, but they would have been higher because a lot of people wanted tighter limits on home size, but they didn't want that particular proposal, which was at 2,400 square feet. So Councilman Koretz has raised it to a middle ground of 3,000, which more than kind of satisfies the other side, or should satisfy the other side, and, honors the community sentiment. Then I just wanted to say we've been working on this for about 7 years, and we really look forward to working with the planning staff and with all sides. We've tried to compromise in the past, but sometimes people don't want to compromise, but we'll continue trying. And we look forward to protecting the neighborhood, and we hope something will move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Kuntz?
Good afternoon, committee members. Christopher Kuntz on behalf of Council District 5, Paul Koretz. All we're asking today is that you refer this item to staff, as was mentioned by some of the speakers. This is an issue we inherited. The councilman's walked this neighborhood and looked at some of the conflicts between new and old homes. It's had small group meetings, has had large town hall meetings, has done a community-wide survey which had a pretty overwhelming result, and that's enough to convince us there is a problem, and people want a solution to that problem, and we need the help of our professional staff to craft the actual RFA and move forward. So we ask for your support in moving it to staff and look forward to working on it.
Okay. Any questions for the staff or my colleagues on this? Then we will go ahead and move to adopt and assign this to the department. That'll be the action of this committee. Number 2, Roberto.
Item number 2, council members, is a proposed ordinance to amend the municipal code to identify permissible alternative paving materials to install in driveways and parking lots.
Okay, we do have one card from the department. Otherwise, would you just like to summarize?
Good afternoon, Deborah Cahan with the Planning Department. Real briefly, permeable paving provides many environmental benefits. It allows water to infiltrate through surfaces and into the aquifer as opposed to gathering pollutants as it's flushed into the stormwater drains and directly into our oceans. On top of these environmental benefits, there's the low-impact development underway that has already been adopted. And allowing permeable paving in parking lots and driveways is a major effort in allowing this, in providing a tool for applicants to meet these regulations. Currently, there's a requirement that only asphalt and concrete can be installed in most driveways and parking lots, and our proposed language will identify a universe of permeable pavings as being comparable to to asphalt and concrete, with a few performance standards. So in summary, we ask that you move this ordinance forward so that we can improve the state of the city.
Great. Every step counts here, so thank you so much. Any questions from my colleagues on? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. You don't cover the cost in this, right? We're just allowing for a different type of use, correct?
Correct. So this allows it. This creates it to be a by right permissible installation. As far as when and where it will be installed will be up to the applicant in their formulation of meeting regulations as well as their personal interest.
Good. Just as a side note, we are looking through the Public Works Committee at finding alternative materials for our sidewalks, and where I've been told anecdotally that it would be cheaper and more environmentally friendlier if we use other types of materials. The cost comes out to be more expensive as we use different types of materials on sidewalks. Has the planning department looked into that as well, and any conclusions there, anything you could share?
Given that that's public property, it's actually under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Street Services. However, I do know that there has been a report published separate from our efforts. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with private property in this ordinance. However, I do know that sometimes there's initial upfront costs that over time does not need maintenance, and then in other circumstances there is continued maintenance that adds a cost. So it depends on the material and the environment in which it's installed.
Any information you have on this, if you could forward it to my office, since we're looking at it through the Public Works Committee and for sidewalks, and we'd love to look at it.
I would be happy to find that report and find the appropriate staff to forward to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Krikorian.
Just briefly, I just wanted to congratulate staff on moving this forward, because for more than a half a century, the stormwater strategy, if you will, in Southern California has been to get it out to the ocean as quickly as we can, at the very same time that we're importing water from all over the state, from the Colorado River and so on. It's a nonsensical policy that has outgrown its usefulness, and the more that we can use permeable surfaces like this to be able to recharge our groundwater, number one, which is the best source for water storage that we can have is recharging and remediating our groundwater reservoirs here, and at the same time reduce the impact on our stormwater infrastructure, which is being strained now with more and more development, more and more paving, which puts more and more water into the system. And third, we're improving the health of our oceans by avoiding the toxins and all of the refuse and everything that gets washed into our stormwater system and out to the ocean. It's vitally important that we move forward more with retaining stormwater and not putting it out to the ocean. And this sort of step is, I think, the kind of thing that puts Los Angeles in the lead in trying to find progressive ways to address this problem. And so I really want to congratulate you. I worked on this issue when I was in the state legislature to try to make permeable pavements more readily available throughout the state. And I'm very glad that this city is taking the lead on it. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. We do have another card, and I'd like to ask Mr. Michael Scudito, who'd like to come up and do sanitation. I'd like to share more thoughts and insight in terms of the project in front of us. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. Just to echo what some of the council members were mentioning, my name is Michael Scudito. I'm with the Bureau of Sanitation Stormwater Program, and I'm here today to speak in support of the Department of Planning's ordinance. On September 27th of this year, the City Council unanimously approved the low-impact development ordinance that was brought to you by the Bureau of Sanitation. The proposed paving ordinance is a key component to assisting developers in complying with that LID ordinance. We work closely with the Department of Planning in making sure that there's total overlap and that we're covering all the bases, and we hope that you approve this and move this forward.
Great. And again, thank you, Mr. Scudito, for your hard work. I know Bureau of Sanitation has gone through it seems to be going through a cultural shift in how we look at these issues and how we do essentially achieve the goals that Councilmember Krikorian has already articulated, and I'm very thankful for that. Colleagues, we are putting together a riverfront district that actually features these types of elements within a specific plan and specific zones that are connected to our major waterways. So the fact that we're going citywide is a big, big move. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So refer this to staff as well, Roberto?
You'll request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance.
That will be the order then. So thank you so much. Okay, next item, Roberto. Well, before we do that, we have items 1, 2, 3 is the big ticket item. We have a healthy set of cards here. But we also have items 4 and on 4, we don't have any cards. Let's just move on that. What's the item number 4?
4 is a closed session item.
It is? Okay, then we'll hold on that. And 5?
I don't think there's a report from the Director of Planning today.
Okay, so then we'll just go to 3 then. Now, colleagues, we do have about... a good hours, maybe 2 hours worth of cards here. And we want to make sure we give everyone a chance to speak. But if we go a minute, there's been a substantial amount of time given in commission, and I know there are more issues that have arisen as a result of the work that has been generated as of late. If we go with a minute, and we'll kind of allow some flexibility there, so we can get to the point. And so, Roberto, read into the record what's in front of us.
Sure, council members, what's before you is a draft ordinance prepared by the Planning Department to regulate the establishment of sign districts and also the imposition of administrative civil penalties. So it's a citywide sign ordinance that's being proposed by the department.
Okay. So we have a presentation of Mr. Bell, and I want to thank Alan and the city attorney for their yeoman's work here. I know it's been starts back in 2002 when we first get pulled into court after a large amount of time before that. Mm-hmm. And so here we are, 2011, and again, we're continuing to move forward and being very methodical. So I thank you and the city attorney and Building and Safety for their due diligence in getting us to this point. So that being said, I'd like to take over, Mr. Bell.
Sure.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Alan Bell, Planning Department staff. This is the second hearing that Plum has held on this particular issue. On August 9th, we had a very robust 3-hour public hearing and received specific direction from Plum on this matter, and there was a great deal of public testimony. What Planning Department staff have done in the interim is we've prepared a revised ordinance that responds to the specific direction from Plum. It also responds to further discussions with the city attorney, the Department of Building and Safety, and then also review of public comments and concerns. Last time I think I was up here for an hour. I promise I will not make such a lengthy presentation today. What I intend to do is just provide a brief overview of the background leading up to today, give an overview of the main provisions of this ordinance, and then focus on some of the substantive policy issues that were raised at the last public hearing. And those three substantive policy issues related to off-site signage in city parks and city facilities, the issue of sign reduction and community benefits, number 2, and then number 3, the grandfathering of the 14 pending sign districts and specific plans that are currently proposed to allow off-site signage. So let me give a brief overview of the background and why it is that we are here today. In 2002, the City Council adopted a groundbreaking ordinance that prohibited new off-site signs on a citywide basis, and at the same time allow the establishment of sign districts where off-site signs could be allowed. Fast forward, there was a lawsuit brought by Worldwide Rush, and it was alleged that this particular regulatory scheme and the granting of exceptions to date violated the First Amendment guarantees of protection. So that trial court invalidated the citywide ban on new off-site signage. In response to that trial court, the city attorney advised that we create new regulations that responded to the very specific First Amendment concerns raised in that particular ruling, but in the meantime, the city attorney filed an appeal. Based upon the city attorney's advice, council asked the planning department to prepare an ordinance, and we did so. There was a very concentrated effort to respond to the timeline. There were 5 public hearings before the City Planning Commission. This is in 2009. And 3 public hearings before the Planning Committee. At the end of the day, when the ordinance was brought before the full City Council, the City Council did not act based upon a request from the new City Attorney to wait on this matter until a decision was made in the Court of Appeal on the Worldwide Rush decision, and that is what the Council decided to do, and the entire matter was remanded back to Plum while the court action worked its way through the court. So then in 2010, last year, the Court of Appeal actually ruled in the city's favor, upholding the city's ordinance and the regulatory scheme that was instructed that we could have a general ban on off-site signage, but also allow exceptions to that ban on a citywide basis. So Plum instructed the planning department to use the Court of Appeal decision as a starting point for strengthening the citywide sign code and to also respond to the legal necessity to make sure that our sign regulations were content neutral. Plum further instructed the planning department to remove from the table any regulations or amendments or changes to the on-site sign code provisions, and to focus on what the committee called consensus items. So that is what brings us up basically here today. Over the last 6 to 8 months, we have been working under that particular direction. So what is in brief, what is the sign ordinance as a whole? It's a 45-page ordinance, very complex bundle of regulations. What does it say in summary? And there are 6 main components to this particular ordinance. The ordinance continues the foundation of citywide sign policy, which is that new off-site sign ban, new off-site signs, and the digital conversion of existing static billboards would be prohibited. So that is the law today. Number 2, the ordinance continues no changes to the regulations on on-site signs. Just as a point of clarification, the ban on digital signs only applies to off-site signage. Currently today, any on-site sign can be a digital, just have a digital display, and based upon the instruction from Plum, no changes have been made to that particular provision other than to establish minimum standards for the regulation of digital displays. Number 3, this ordinance includes substantial new administrative civil penalties. There was a great deal of support at the Planning Commission and then from the public and also, I believe, from Plum to strengthen our ability to take action against violations of the city's ban. What New York City has done is they have a very robust, very aggressive schedule of penalties. So we have included that in this particular provision. These are penalties that are intended to be a deterrent, and if there are, in fact, illegal signs that go up, this would empower the enforcement agency, the Department of Building and Safety, to impose fines of up to $48,000 a day for repeat violations. Number 4, the sign ordinance includes a 3-tiered system for considering exceptions from the citywide sign code. We have a very large city. One size does not fit all. There needs to be a system for considering exceptions from these citywide regulations, but the system for considering requests for exceptions from those regulations need to be congruent with case law on the matter. So we have drafted a new bundle of regulations to consider these exceptions that tier off case law on the matter, that provide very objective standards, very objective criteria that have met the test of case law, and that would ensure that we're not going to get ourselves into legal trouble. Specific plans. One of the key provisions of the current ordinance is that literally the entire city of Los Angeles, under the current regulatory scheme, could be converted to allowing off-site signs, because a specific plan allows today an off-site sign, and any property in the city can be governed by a specific plan. Furthermore, the ordinance restricts sign districts only to commercial and manufacturing zones. So there's a twofold concern. One is, with the current regulatory scheme, do we want to allow a system that would allow basically the city to invalidate the ban, which is the city's foundational policy, and grant so many exceptions from that ban that we would reach a tipping point where a court may say, well, as a practical matter, you really don't have a ban. You've granted so many exceptions that effectively you have disavowed that ban, so therefore the ban should be removed. So one of the things that this recommended ordinance does is it establishes ground rules that restrict the areas of the city where we would consider even establishing a sign district or allow off-site signs or digital off-site signs. So 2 things that we recommend, both from a policy standpoint and also from a legal standpoint. Number 1, that we not allow specific plans, which can be established over any parcel in the city, to deviate from the citywide sign code except if they're going to be more restrictive. So that would mean that a specific plan under this proposal could not allow an off-site sign, could not allow a digital off-site sign. Very important recommendation. The second recommendation is to restrict the area where sign districts, which can allow off-site signs and digital signs, where they can be established. Again, currently today you can have a sign district in any commercial or manufacturing zone in the city, and this map shows all the, in the blue, all the industrial zoning, and in the red, all of the commercial zoning in the city of Los Angeles. And today you can establish a sign district in any of those areas. So, again, consistent with the direction that the court has established, we would propose to limit the areas where a sign district can be established in a way that is much more consistent with the general plan, and to limit those areas to three main categories. And that would be in the greater downtown area, which is the big red spot in the middle, the Port of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles International Airport, and then finally areas of the city that are planned for regional commercial or regional center, which are the areas of the city that the general plan says are planned for the most intense development possible in the city. So we think it makes sense from a land use policy standpoint as a basic citywide ground rule to limit these districts to these areas and not to allow them virtually on any square foot or any parcel in the city of Los Angeles. So that's an overview of the basic structure of the ordinance that we're recommending. And now I want to address some of the three main policy issues that were addressed at the last hearing on August the 9th. So the first main policy issue has to do with parks and city-owned facilities, and the issue there is, should we allow off-site signage in parks and city-owned facilities? When we drafted the sign code regulations and we included a number of different provisions, it was never the planning department's intent to allow off-site signage through this mechanism. It was always intended to address off-site signage on privately owned property. It was brought to our attention that the way we had drafted those regulations, that in fact it could apply to city facilities and to city parks. Notwithstanding the fact that that was not our intention, notwithstanding the fact that there was no discussion of this before the Planning Commission, that was not our awareness as planning staff when we were drafting these regulations. Since then, there's been a motion introduced by Councilwoman Jan Perry and seconded by Councilmember Parks to address this particular issue. The council never voted on this motion, and it was referred to Plum, but it hasn't been agendized and has not been referred to planning department staff and therefore placed on the department's work program. So we would advise as an interim step establishing within this ordinance clear policy direction that this ordinance would not address that particular issue until the full council is able to more deliberately address this issue, until the planning staff is given the resources and the direction to address this particular issue. I think it deserves thoughtful study. It's a very complex issue. It should go through the usual procedure of a code study, a planning commission hearing and consideration, and then we go on to Plum with public involvement, none of which has particularly happened to date. So we would not recommend backing into this policy based upon a technicality, but that it should be added to a work program for some future sign unit that would address a whole list of other robust issues that should be addressed more thoughtfully and much more carefully than we can do as part of this particular ordinance. The next issue I want to address relates to the Court of Appeals decision in Worldwide Rush, because this is a very important foundation for crafting this particular regulation. In essence, what the Court of Appeal has done here is that it has established a new ground rule from this date forward for considering any exceptions from the citywide ban. In essence, what the court found was, since the city adopted a citywide ban in the first place for two reasons, one, to improve the visual environment, and secondly, to improve traffic safety, if the city wants to grant exceptions from that citywide ban, then that exception must be directly connected to either the elimination of blight, an improvement of aesthetics, or improvements in traffic safety. In other words, that granting that exception outweighs any harm that might be done by granting that exception to the overall citywide policy of protecting the visual environment and improving traffic safety. So that is the legal test, that if we are to grant any exception, we must, within our ordinance, make a very specific and very clear finding that granting that exception either eliminates blight, either improves aesthetics, or either improves traffic safety. So, that said, the court has granted a great deal of latitude to the city council to craft sign regulations within that policy framework. So I think that what is before the committee today is how much flexibility do we want to embed in this enabling ordinance. Again, I want to emphasize that this is enabling ordinance, that every sign district has to go through the usual process before it can be adopted. How prescriptive do we want to be within the citywide ground rules? And there are 4 options that I'd like to offer for your consideration today and request policy direction on that.
Mr. Barrows, you paused for a second. I just wanted to close public comment in terms of cards. I think I'll leave it open as we keep going. We'll probably stay here all night. So I'm going to close acceptance of cards for public comment, and we can take your cards for the record, and then we'll just hold on to those. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, the first option, this is not in any of the ordinance drafts that we have provided, but it is an option that is available to the City Council. And that would be to only include what we're calling the worldwide rush finding in the ordinance and not specify anywhere in the ordinance either a sign reduction standard or a community benefits standard, but just leave it open-ended within the enabling ordinance and just merely allow on a case-by-case, district-by-district basis, the details to be worked out, but we would just simply lay out this basic ground rule. That's not what the Planning Commission recommended, and it's not what the Planning Department has recommended, but our advice from the City Attorney's Office is that this is certainly legal approach. There are policy issues, but it does satisfy the Court of Appeals' determination that we would need to make this connection between any exception and these 3 factors. So the second option that I'd like to point out is the option that was specifically recommended by the City Planning Commission at the end of their series of hearings in 2009 on the matter, and that was to include as a minimum requirement for any new sign district net sign reduction. And what I mean by net sign reduction, that for every square foot of a new off-site sign that goes up, that it be offset by a greater than 1-for-1 reduction in existing off-site signage, either within the sign district itself or in a sign impact area that could be defined when the sign district application is presented to the City Planning Department. Some of the arguments for this particular option: the city does not have any good mechanism for reducing some of the 10,000 billboards that we currently have on a citywide basis throughout the city. So this is a mechanism that would allow us to do that. A third option kind of splits the difference, and this includes both sign reduction and community benefits, and this is something that Plum specifically asked us to take a look at. This would require some modest sign reduction. 2 square feet of sign area could go up, offset by only 1 square foot of sign that would have to come down. So there would be a net proliferation in signs in the city, but we would also recommend that you could fill in the gap, as it were, with community benefits, and I think that this is consistent with the direction from Plum. This provides more flexibility in this large city of 469 square miles with different community needs, different community issues, different approaches and priorities, and it would still satisfy the test laid out by the court. Some of the benefits that we would include within this community benefits package includes a provision of public art, public parking, facade and streetscape improvements, and then a catch-all category of other improvements that were directly related to the elimination of blight, improvement of traffic safety, or improvement in the visual environment. And then the fourth option is sign reductions or community benefits. We could write this into the ordinance. We could include robust sign reduction. We can include community benefits, and they would be equal options. and we wouldn't necessarily express one preference for one over the other. That could be worked out when each sign district application is to be worked out and go through the whole legislative process. The next main issue that I want to address is the whole issue of grandfathering. There was quite a bit of discussion about this both at the Planning Commission and also at the last public hearing. And what we included in our last report back in July was that we established a firm grandfathering date of August the 9th, which was the Plum hearing, that the applications that had been received to that date or initiated prior to that date would be processed under the rules in effect on that at that time. And the issue there had to do with a matter of fairness. They had been gone through some amount of processing. They were initiated based upon understanding of the rules at that time. What we would recommend at a minimum with respect to the whole grandfathering issue, since we do have the Court of Appeal decision, we have this legal framework, we really don't, as a city, have an option to not require going forward for the granting of any exception that all sign districts, new ones or so-called grandfather districts, meet at a minimum the worldwide rush test. We think at a minimum that is absolutely necessary. The council could go one step further and then also require that these grandfather districts meet whatever community benefits or sign reduction package is ultimately included within the ground rules for establishment of sign districts themselves. So those are the three main policy issues that I wanted to bring to the committee's attention today. So our specific recommendations today is to direct the city attorney to begin drafting up this ordinance, assuming that at the end of the hearing today the committee comes to a final determination on some of these main policy issues that I've just highlighted, but that are also spelled out in the draft ordinance. Secondly, to direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance that would establish a trust fund to allow donations from private entities to fund a sign unit. One of the issues that was brought up at the last hearing was just the very long list of policy issues that are very important to the city council, from on-site digital signs to re-permitting, relocation agreements, now signs in parks and city facilities. A very long list of critical policy issues that our position is require an investment in resources, an investment in consultant time to advise us. The payoff would be that we would be able to have the resources to address that particular issue. And then if we want to address very squarely the issue of generating revenue for the city on city facilities or other city-owned property, we'll be able to do that backed up by the knowledge that a consultant would be able to provide us, and we would have that data, that economic analysis, that fiscal analysis, so that we would be able to bring that back to the council and do so on a much more informative basis than we are able to do now. And then our final bundle of recommendations is we haven't had enough time to further research 4 issues, so we're asking for additional number of weeks to address these issues and report back with a report on November the 15th Plum hearing. And those 4 issues have to do with brightness of digital displays, both daytime standards and then also nighttime standards. We need additional time to research that before we have a final recommendation for council. Sign adjustments for off-site signs that went up before the ban went into effect. Number 2, administrative law judges. This is an innovative method of addressing some of the staff shortage that we have in the Office of Zoning Administration to allow administrative law judges to supplement city staff, so that if there are appeals, for example, of penalty violations, that we would not be inundated with these appeals, and we would not have the resource capacity within the planning department to, on a timely and adequate basis, address those appeals. So we want to explore further the ALJ technique, which has been used to success in New York City and then also in San Francisco. And then finally, we want to come back with a budget for a sign unit specifically that we feel would be needed to address both the policy issues and then also to process applications for new sign districts, which currently are all pending. So that concludes my presentation today.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. I do have a couple of questions, and they arise as a result of conversations I've had with different stakeholders and observers of the process. And one of them is the body of information that's in front of the Plum Committee today. When you look at what Commission had reviewed and the level of input by the community in those rigorous meetings, then you have the worldwide rush decision, then you have this body of work in front of us. Can you tell me, as one of the stewards of this process, to what degree the information in front of us today, how much has it changed given all the public input that's occurred up to now? What are we, the body we're reviewing today, is it changed dramatically from what Planning Commission reviewed? Has it changed slightly? Can you just speak to that issue? Because it does, how can I put this? I want to make sure the integrity of the public process remains intact. And so that being said, I just want to get your perspective on that concern.
Much of what the City Planning Commission recommended remains intact in this particular ordinance. Fundamentally, the Planning Commission agreed with our recommendations to not allow specific plans to be a vehicle to grant exceptions from the ban. That is in this ordinance. The Planning Commission agreed with our recommendations to restrict sign districts to a small percentage of the city, namely downtown, regional centers, and regional commercial. That is within this ordinance. The Planning Commission was very supportive of administrative civil penalties as a way of encouraging compliance with the city's sign regulations. What is not in this ordinance that the Planning Commission took action on was in the whole arena of on-site signage, business identification signage. That this is what this property is selling, or this business is identification signs, and so on and so forth. So, based upon our understanding of the legal issues at that time, we had recommended a restriction of the sign rights allowed for on-site signage quite dramatically. That was very controversial. The business community's belief was that now was not the time to undertake such a dramatic cut in those particular sign regulations given the state of the city's economy, and that we should defer action on that pending adoption of a more robust sign code enforcement program. And I think what the committee, the Plum Committee, decided was that this was not the right time to tackle this particular issue, and that was the instruction that was given to staff. As far as sign reduction, there was a great deal of Planning Commission discussion back and forth of the pros and cons of sign reduction versus community benefits. A lot of discussion about that. They had a subcommittee that really tackled that particular issue, and I think at the end of the day, Planning Commission came down in favor of sign reduction only as the mechanism for justifying an exception from the city's-wide ban. Again, I want to point out that's not the only way to meet the worldwide rush test. The legal framework is very expansive that the Court of Appeal has outlined, and there are different ways to address this issue, and community benefits is certainly a legitimate way. An argument to having more options on the table, more flexibility as far as those options is that as each sign district goes through the process, the precise bundle of regulations can be worked out based upon community needs, community assessment of priorities, and those options would therefore be available as we work it through the whole process.
And to put into context, given what you just said, and with the assertion of the 4 issues coming back later, is capacity building, the ability for the unit to drill down on these issues in a more methodical fashion based on the foundation, the premise of the band, and building up from there. Would I be accurate in saying that?
Yes, this is. I don't believe, this is an almost 50-page ordinance that I think is a quantum leap forward in our sign regulations, but it's not the end of the story. There are a whole bundle of issues that are very important to the community, that various council members have introduced motions. I think up to 20 motions have been introduced by members of the council asking the department to address this issue and that issue and so on and so forth. All important issues, but I think that we would require additional resources and a much more deliberate process to tackle them in a thoughtful, deliberate manner in a way that we're not able to right now because of the resource constraints. Again, I don't need to point out the staffing reduction that has occurred within the department within the last year due to early retirement.
40%.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have to be careful about making sure that we don't overcommit the department's resources, because then we will not be able to deliver on the commitments that we have already made, like community plans, for example, like addressing some of the other important ordinances on other council motions that council has introduced.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions before we dig into public comment? Because I think we're going to hear a lot. Okay. That being said, they do have, thank you, Mr. Bell, again, and thank you, and the city attorney staff. City attorney, anything you want to add before we dig in? Okay, bye-bye. All right. Again, thank you for your hard work. And let's begin with Ms. Weitzer from Councilman LaBarge's office. You have a whole minute. I know I have a 3-page paper there, right?
1 whole minute for CD4? I'll try.
I'm not going to go there.
I'll try and be as brief as I can. Renee Weitzer, representing Councilman Tom LaBarge. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Councilman LaBarge cannot support the sign ordinance because it does grandfather, I believe, at least 14 projects. You asked the question of Mr. Bell as to the difference what the Planning Commission did, and one of the things the Planning Commission did, they did not grandfather all of those projects. They only grandfathered 2 of the projects, which had gone through the entitlement process, had been approved by council. All these other projects have not gone through the process. I got myself off my little speech here. We strongly object to the grandfathering of projects that have simply filed an application and perhaps are in the EIR stage, but have not gone through the process and have not been approved by council. Why should, my God, is this it?
Thank you very much. Council District 5,
Are we serious?
We are very serious.
I didn't finish.
We are 2.5 hours serious, so thank you very much. Christopher Coons, District 5. That's a great job. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. Christopher Kuntz on behalf of Paul Koretz, CD5, and it's always hard to follow Renee, but I have actually some similar comments. We've received a lot of mail, a lot of phone calls, a lot of concern from neighborhood council members and other stakeholders about this ordinance, and we think we can get to a place where we can support it, but we're not there today. We can't support this ordinance. If for no other reason, we heard about 4 follow-up items that we're going to hear about after we vote on this. There's going to be a follow-up, and that seems to be out of order to us. We think there's issues with R1 adjacency. A lot of work has been done in the last few weeks about dealing with this parks issue, and there's some concern that we didn't get the language right, and we think that just a little bit more time or some consultation with the commission would help address those issues. But I think the biggest concern when we talk about whether this has buy-in, and these were referred to as consensus items, and I don't think there is consensus, is the grandfathering, because all the benefits of this new ordinance don't mean anything if the grandfather
Thank you, sir.
districts all over the
Craig
state.
Lawson. Sandy Brown, Alan Wadham, Mr. Lawson, Ms. Brown,
Oh, you want to say?
and Ms. Wadham. Good afternoon, sir. You're welcome to come up to the microphone. It's okay. Ms. Brown, you're welcome to come to the microphone if you like. And Ms. Wadham, Mr. Lawson, maybe we can keep the
Got it.
you can line up. Come on up.
I'm Craig Lawson, representing the property owners of Figueroa and Olympic Sign District, which is a district that's been pending for several years. We support the grandfather clause, but we have some concerns that we have presented in a letter that was sent around to you about when signs can be removed and when the credits for those removals could be granted. So we ask that you please consider that in the letter that's been submitted. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. 30 seconds. Amazing. Sandy Brown, and then Ann Waldman.
I'll take his 30 seconds.
No, you won't. Wishful thinking.
I'm Sandy Brown, and I'm with the Homeby Westwood Property Owners Association, as well as with a huge coalition of thousands and thousands of residents, of which we have 15 neighborhood councils. I believe I gave you a list of all of these people and coalitions that oppose this ordinance as written. One of the things that we're most concerned about is compatibility. Compatibility with the residential community. That is silent in this ordinance, and we strongly urge you to include some aspect with regard to compatibility and the surrounding residential area. And I also wanted to commend Alan Bell and his department on what they've done. It's been a long haul. We are far from over, and we do want to come back and face you again and have more input than we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Looking forward to that. Ms. Waldman? I saw Ann out there. Ann leave? She left? Okay. She was earlier. Oh, he's here. Okay. Councilman Rosendahl, are you ready? Come on up, sir. Councilor, we give everybody a minute, but...
Thank you very much. Who is here from the 11th District? Stand up. Okay. How many of you feel this is something that we should not approve today? All right, I just wanted to get a sense of the energy from my group.
Well, that's good, because we're not going to prove anything today.
Okay, great. Colleagues, you've seen the letters and you've heard the comments here today. There's a lot of concern about this ordinance. In my district, there's been almost a unanimous rejection of this ordinance by my constituents, and I share their concerns. Back in 2009, we as a council were prepared to approve a sign ordinance that has almost unanimous support from the community. The ordinance before you today does not even come close to having that level of support. That's very telling. It tells me that we need to look at this proposal more closely. We shouldn't be in a rush to approve here. A lot of what I'm hearing from my constituents is that they want to ensure that our specific plans, our overlay zones, and community plans are respected and protected. What people are looking for is clarity of language and intent, technical changes that will benefit all of us as a city in the long run so that we don't wind up with unintended consequences. Therefore, I share those concerns and strongly believe that the comments deserve careful consideration by the Planning Department and this committee.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you very much.
Any comments, colleagues, or points? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We look forward to your support on that. Thank you.
That was within a minute. That was a record. Thank you, Councilmember. Martha Benedict and Will Wright. Martha Benedict and Will Wright. Martha Benedict. Going once. Will Wright.
Good afternoon. Will Wright with the American Institute of Architects. You have our letter in front of you with our comments on how to improve this ordinance. I think you'll hear that echo throughout the room today. The one question I really want us to ask ourselves as a city, and enjoy the participation of the entire room here, is what do we want our city to look like? How do we want to experience the city of Los Angeles? How do we want to relate to our built environment? And how can we compare ourselves to other communities? I think this is a deep question that the planning department's working through, and I think we're welcome to be at that table, and we look forward to continuing refining this ordinance because there are quite a few people that care and really and truly do want to make the Los Angeles a better place.
Again, I just want to say AI has always been supportive of the city in the process, and I appreciate your insight there, Mr. Wright. Stephen Nissen, David Goldberg, and Don Silver. Stephen Nissen, David Goldberg, and Don Silver.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Steve Nissen. I'm Senior Vice President at NBC Universal. Universal City, as you know, is a self-contained area of 391 acres, contains film and TV studio production, post-production facilities, city walk, and a theme park. We employ over 9,000 people, and we want to increase the number of entertainment-related jobs in LA. So for the past 4 years, since 2007, we have worked with the city to process NBC Universal plans for improving our property, including discussing at length the issue of signage. Signage is unique in our industry. If you visited Universal and City Walk, you know that our signs are things like a neon-lit giant gorilla hanging from the rafters at City Walk, a 3-story high electric guitar, a fountain that's pictured throughout the world in postcards. Consistent with past city practice, the July draft of the Sign Ordinance would have accounted for projects like ours.
Thank you very much.
We just asked for time to address staff and
David Goldberg. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. David Goldberg of Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delvac here today on behalf of AEG. The Convention Center Modernization and Event Center project is one of the grandfathered projects that would be protected from the new sign district provisions. At this committee's August 9th meeting, the Planning Department staff presented what we believed was a very fair transition rule. However, the October 5th report radically changed that and would require new grandfathered sign districts to comply with many of the same requirements for future sign districts. We don't believe that this is necessary to comply with the Worldwide Rush requirements, and we're very concerned that this new transition rule doesn't provide a workable solution for these pending projects that would bring substantial economic development and new jobs that are sorely needed to this city. We've proposed to planning staff a revised transition rule that we believe would still accomplish the same goals that they have, but also meet the needs for these pending projects, and we ask for more time to work with staff to develop a rule and come back to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don Silver, then we have Donald Seligman, and then Jacqueline Carr. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Dan Silver. The Endangered Habitats League is dedicated to high-quality urban spaces. A question. When other cities do not rely on noxious advertising for economic development, how did the city of Los Angeles get into this trap, and how will it get out of it? At a minimum here, there should be no grandfathering, and there should be an in-kind takedown requirement rather than the amorphous and ineffective and really circumventing community benefits option. A great city does not deface its beautiful buildings. A great city does not demean its citizens and its public spaces with this advertising. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I am Donald Seligman, President of the Los Feliz Improvement Association. We represent thousands of residents in the Los Feliz district of Los Angeles. We have supported pragmatic and reasonable regulation of billboards and signage for nearly the entire 95 years of our existence. We are extremely concerned about the recent proposals to weaken existing signage regulations. We strongly urge you to include the following tenets in any ordinances relating to billboards and off-site signage. Any proposed ordinance should undergo review by the City Planning Commission. Any increase in electronic signs should be compensated by commensurate removal of existing billboards. City parks and city-owned properties should be categorically excluded from any comprehensive sign program. Grandfathered sign districts' increased density should be accompanied by compensatory removal of billboards outside their districts, and comprehensive sign programs in overlay districts and specific plans should continue to be regulated according to current law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jacqueline Carr, Ed Wasserman, and Barbara Navarro. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, council members, it's very understandable that the city very desperately needs money now, and that additional signage is going to be a great way to bring it in. That's fine. However, we already have a very good plan on the books. We really don't need any further embellishments. We don't need further sign usage districts except what have already been approved. Please go very slow on this. You're going to hear from people continually on this because we're losing control of our area. We're losing control of our neighborhoods. The people who are west of LA Live have been complaining and quite loudly about this. There's quite a bit of intrusion through their windows, through just walking up and down the street, and it's offensive. Don't take us there. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Ed Wasserman, Barbara Navarro, and Marion Dodge. Good afternoon, sir.
Ed Wasserman on behalf of the California Sign Association. Thank you, Councilman Reyes and Plum members, for your leadership in protecting on-site business signs. The proposed minimum area for sign district is excessive. Currently, only 1 block of 3 acres is required. Planning's proposal is a 5-fold increase, up to 15 acres. This change is unnecessary and ties the hands of council members to decide what is best for their own district. It is already difficult to establish a sign district. The fee is over $140,000, and there are multiple levels of discretionary review. Indeed, there are only 2 existing sign districts in this city. We understand your rationale to create a sense of place, but a one-size-fits-all approach rarely works for our diverse city, and a 15-acre district would be far too large. There could not be a worse time to take away options from our decision makers, and these sign districts provisions just do that. We respectfully request that a minimum threshold for sign district
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
current levels.
I'd like to ask the folks that are in the back of the room on the sides, if you don't mind, please taking your conversations outside. Truly appreciate that. It's hard to hear with the acoustics in here, so please have some courtesy for those who are at the microphone. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Plum Committee. I am Barbara Navarro from San Pedro Electric Sign Company, and I am speaking on behalf of the California Sign Association. First of all, I'd like to thank Plum Committee for your leadership in protecting and preserving on-site signs and for attracting and growing business in the city of LA.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Hello.
There you go.
We're concerned specifically with your sign adjustment fee, which we think is prohibitively expensive for the majority of its attendant applicants. Most applicants will require a sign adjustment for minor requests on small signs, yet the proposed cost of a sign adjustment, almost $6,000, exceeds the average cost of a sign, which is about $5,000. We are also concerned that this will lead to more illegal signs. Similarly, planning has recommended a prohibitively high fee for a comprehensive sign program, which we would respectfully request that you revisit as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, Marion Dodge. Good afternoon, ma'am. Then Carol Henning.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Marion Dodge, president of the Federation of Hillside and Canyon Associations, which represents 200,000 constituents in 33 homeowners associations spanning the Santa Monica Mountains. The Federation opposes the sign ordinance as it is currently written. It has so many exceptions that it is vulnerable to numerous lawsuits, which are very costly to the city. Among the problems are the internal sign exemption would allow signage in city parks, recreation centers, and other sensitive areas. It fails to protect scenic highways and corridors and historic districts. A buffer of 1,000 feet should be required between a sign district and a sensitive use area. The community benefits should be eliminated as they are measures a developer is already required to provide. The sign ordinance has lost its focus, which was to reduce signage. The ordinance should be rejected.
Thank you, ma'am. Carol Henning, Tis Nelson, and Chris Uabe or Labe. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Carol Henning from the Sierra Club Griffith Park Task Force. The Sierra Club stands in solidarity with Occupy Wall Street protests. What do the people in front of City Hall want? They want an end to corporate greed. What does this have to do with opposing adoption of the revised citywide sign ordinance? Well, this ordinance in its current revised form would seem to allow a proliferation of commercial advertising a celebration of corporate greed, if you will, on private and public property, and might include advertising in public parks. Who would benefit? The billboard lobby and the corporations they represent, who would lose the public as usual. The people who already suffer under a daily barrage of ads and who seek out parks as refuges. Please join the Angeles chapter of the Sierra Club and oppose the commercialization of our parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tess Dawson, Chris Head. And you are Tess. Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Chris Head, same. Charles Soder. Are we on the wave here? Are we on a roll? No, okay. Mr. Soder, come on up. Victor de la Cruz.
Charles Soder. As written right now, the door has been left open for signs in parks, and also the effect on residential neighborhoods near sign districts were not taken into consideration whatsoever. So I think this should go back and be rewritten. I think if the sign industry has a place at the table, the public should have a place at the table too, and I think the public can be ably represented by the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Victor de la Cruz, Wendy Sue Rosen.
Good afternoon, Council members. Victor de la Cruz, Manette Phelps and Phillips on behalf of Regency Outdoor Advertising. I'm just here to talk about one issue that should be an easy one when there actually was no controversy until staff made a seemingly innocuous last-minute change to the draft ordinance with multiple unintended consequences. The issue of who should get sign credits for billboard takedowns. As you probably know, the proposed ordinance was recently modified so that credits would be awarded to landowners instead of sign owners. We urge you to think through what is being proposed here. The last time the city awarded sign credits belonging to a billboard company, the city was sued and lost. So why would you go in that direction again? Most importantly, if the goal is sign reduction, individual landowners don't have enough signs to take down, so no takedowns would occur. Your staff report at page 3 states that the Hollywood Sign District has worked well and is the model for the new takedown program. It fails to mention, however, that in the Hollywood SUD, almost all of the credits have gone to sign owners. That is what got signs to come down. So if you want billboards to come down as they did in Hollywood, then actually follow the model that staff says works.
Thank you very much. Wendy Sue Rosen. Bernadette Soder.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to testify on behalf of the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight. I want to just start by saying that there are two problems with this ordinance. One is process, and the second is content. Process will be talked about by John Given after me. This has to go back to the City Planning Commission. When you asked Ellen Bell about the substantive changes, there have been many. We have outlined them in a long, lengthy letter. You only need to look at a few to know this has to go back to be reviewed. Content, you're going to hear from everybody else, so I just want to say a few things about how many groups that we know of oppose this ordinance. 44 so far that we've collected. And that includes from areas Atwater Village, Elysian Park, Mount Washington, East Hollywood, Griffith Park, Los Feliz, Encino, Studio City, Granada Hills, Sunland, Westwood, Mid-Wilshire, Brentwood, Venice, Playa del Rey. I'm sure there are others. In my last minute, I'd just like to say that Alan Bell did not address the exception to interior signs, for interior signs at all in his presentation, and that allows signs in parks.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Bernadette Soder.
Hi, I'm Bernadette Soder. I'm representing Friends of Griffith Park. You have our letter regarding the draft. I'm glad to see that parks and public properties are no longer eligible to be comprehensive sign districts, but they are still vulnerable. The interior sign exception can allow off-site signs in parks and rec centers. Sign districts can be allowed that abut and face parks and rec centers. We strongly urge you to remove these exemptions. Going forward, we are concerned about the recommendation to roll the parks question forward for study by a privately funded sign unit. The public has spoken and made its opinions clear. We don't want signs in our parks, nor do we want parks to be positioned as revenue sources. So I'm really here to ask you to please help us out and end this debate now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. John Given.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes.
and committee members. My name is John Gibbon. I'm speaking today on behalf of 6 stakeholder organizations. We submitted a letter to the record earlier today, and I can identify them after my time is up if you'd like. But I'd like to focus briefly on the process, as Wendy Rosen mentioned. So I appreciate your question of Deputy Bell, because I think it is all about the process. The Charter requires that the Planning Commission report and recommend on land use ordinances, and they have reported and recommend, but not on the ordinance that's before you. There are many, many substantive changes, and the CPC has not delegated to the Director of Planning on this particular ordinance, nor does their standing delegation for clerical and technical issues cover this ordinance. As has been discussed, there are many, many, many substantive changes here. The few that really jump out at one are grandfathering the community benefits program and, of course, the interior sign exception. These have all been mentioned, but there are many other changes as outlined in our letter. And as said, we believe this needs to go back to CPC.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Ray Baker, David Bell, Kathy Daldon, and Stash Molesky. Come on up. That's Ray Baker, David Bell, Kathy Daldon, Stash Molesky. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to say I'm Ray Baker with Lamar Advertising. We're one of the 3rd largest outdoor advertising companies in the country. We believe that we're really close with this ordinance. I know there's a few issues that we've been talking about and that are not included in this. One of the things that I've heard echoed today, just in the brief amount of hearings, is reduction. There's a lot of people talking about reduction, but there's not a lot of reduction in this ordinance. One of the things that we still feel very confident about is that we need to have more reduction for billboards if we're going to have other billboards built. One of the programs we proposed was to have a manner of taking down signs to put up signs, not only in sign districts, but all over the city. With that being said, we want to avoid legal challenges. We don't want that to happen. We would much rather the policymakers make those decisions and not the attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. David Bell, Kathy Daldon, and Stash Molesky. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm David Bell. I'm the president of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and we didn't make the list today on the agenda, but we also voted to oppose the sign ordinance. And essentially, when it comes to in East Hollywood, we don't have any parks to speak of, but we can see the park from our neighborhood, and so we care about it very much. So that's one of the issues that I'm hearing from the people in East Hollywood, and essentially the people in my neighborhood that I hear from generally consider billboards to equate with blight, and so we would ask the city to aggressively do what they can to eliminate billboard signage throughout the city, and to the extent that has to, if it results in further litigation, then we would hope the city would go to fight for its constituents here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Kathy Daldon, Stash Molesky.
I'll be quick. Kathy Deladani, representing the Tarzana Neighborhood Council. For the record, the Tarzana Neighborhood Council opposes the sign ordinance as it is currently written. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Stash Molesky. Then we'll have Wolfgang Veith, I believe, and Sharon Commons. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, my name is Stash Molesky. I'm the director of ICU Art, and I'm from 2554 Lincoln Boulevard, Venice, California. I'm also a member of the City of Los Angeles Mural Working Group. I'm here representing muralists, and I would like to recommend, as it pertains to sign districts, that we find a way that we can include muralists as part of these sign districts in a one way that these muralists can provide aesthetic benefits for the community. And that basically says that if you go for option number 4, where you don't have to have a sign permit to participate in the sign district, there could be other community benefits. That would be a good thing, because then muralists could participate in the sign district, and they could bring real aesthetic community value, input to these communities, instead of just rewarding those big sign companies who basically brought us to this situation we're in today. So, I mean, just a small little crack of an opportunity for these muralists to participate in these districts would be much appreciated.
Thank you, sir. Wolfgang Veith, Sharon Commons, and then we'll have Beth Gordy, I believe. Good afternoon, sir.
Wolfgang Veit, North Westwood Village Residents Association and the Westwood Community Council. I've been living in Los Angeles since 1969. I have seen what's happening with Los Angeles. I've seen the billboards get more, bigger, more garish. And no people in Los Angeles like billboards. I think 100% of the people think billboard is blight, pollution, and they rather not have them. There's a very small percentage who directly benefit from billboards. These are the people who put them up, the construction workers, and of course the corporations who profit from it. This is only 1% of the Los Angeles population. 99% of the Los Angeles population hates billboards, would rather see them all go. So, this ordinance doesn't address that, and it changed so dramatically since the council adopted it.
Sharon Commons, thank you very much. Sharon Commons, Beth Gordy, and Gail Rogers.
It won't take me very long. Mar Vista Community Council didn't make the cut on your agenda, but we too passed a community impact statement opposing this ordinance as written. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Beth Gordy, Gail Rogers, and Lois Becker.
Good afternoon. I'm Beth Gordy with Latham & Watkins. The code currently states that the city's sign regulations are only applicable to exterior signs. Your committee has provided consistent direction that interior signs, such as those at outdoor shopping centers, sports stadiums, and studios, should not be regulated by the code's exterior sign provisions. Despite your consistent direction, the current version of the draft sign ordinance still creates confusion as to what constitutes an exterior sign and what constitutes an interior sign intended to be exempt from the code. We have submitted language to ensure that shopping center interior signs and Dodger Stadium scoreboards are considered interior signs. The current version of the sign ordinance also adds a new provision stating that the sign illumination from an interior sign may not be visible from any public right-of-way or any property other than the subject property. This could effectively prohibit all signs, including at Dodger Stadium. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I ask a question? Is that, ma'am, is your proposed language in the letter you submitted today? Because I also had some confusion as to the way it's currently written, so I want...
Yes, we submitted letters on behalf of Westfield and the Dodgers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gail Rogers, and then Lois Becker, and then Mark Stratton.
Good afternoon, Gail Rogers. I live in Venice. I'm a member of the Oceanfront Walk Committee of the Venice Neighborhood Council, which opposes the ordinance. I live on one of the walk streets that abut the Oceanfront Walk. You mean people live in Venice? Yes, we do. You mean the place which no longer has coastal access or view due to the proliferation of illegal building along the ocean side of the boardwalk? Yep, we live there. Now recently the Department of Parks, Rec and Parks, has thought of our skate park as a good place to put up signage. So I went down to the skate park to visualize what it might look like, and lo and behold, I see the sign saying what is not allowed in the park. It says, no stickers. Now, the city wants to break its own rules and hang up big stickers.
Thank you, ma'am. Lois Becker, Mark Stratton, and then Rosemary Del Monte.
Hi, I'm Lois Becker, and I'm here on behalf of Bel Air Skycrest. My community cares about having a fair, balanced, and unambiguous sign ordinance, one that truly reduces and regulates signage, and that offers real protections for residential neighborhoods, specific plan areas, and designated scenic and historic cultural areas, parks, schools, and so on throughout the city, and that does not grandfather in 12 additional sign districts, streamlining the process so that this ordinance has the teeth taken out of it before it even goes into effect. We also care very much about public process, and the public process has been hijacked here. This ordinance needs to go back to the City Planning Commission. We appreciate all the work that the Planning Department has already done, and we ask that they keep at it till they get it right. Thank you.
Mark Stratton and Rosemary Del Monte. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Mark Stratton, Bel Air Skycrest, and the Hillside Federation. I always thought that LA would come to look like Blade Runner, but I didn't think it would happen the year 2011. Instead, I thought it would happen maybe around the year 4000. And I think with 14 grandfathered districts, we rushed towards that, and I think it needs to be sent back and reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosemary Del Monte. I'm with the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Planning and Zoning Committee. And I want to say that what Mr. Rosenthal said is that the original ordinance was worked with the communities, and the communities felt like we had something that had our our wishes. Now we come to find out that there's this new ordinance that comes back with, I don't know, completely different things. All of our wishes are gone. We've now got donor signs, and we can go ad nauseum on the grandfathering, how wrong that is. And also what happened to the citizens' right to sue after you've destroyed their home and their property value. What's been mentioned is what's going on the lawn out there. What has happened here with this ordinance is exactly that the corporate interests have come to you, not to you necessarily, but have worked, their lobbyists work, and the voice of the people has been sorely trumped for their welfare.
Thank you.
I wish you reconsider.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Silagi Napier, Joseph F. Young, and Ryan Brooks.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I oppose this ordinance as it is now written. It needs to be referred back to the City Planning Commission and have more public input. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Joseph Young.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Joe Young, and I'm on the executive committee of the Sierra Club's Angeles chapter, which represents all of LA County and Orange County, and we have over 40,000 members. We appreciate inclusion of the language that parks are to be excluded from comprehensive sign districts, assuming you really mean it. But that's not enough. Advertising signage, including but not limited to billboards, should simply be banned from insides and adjacent to city parks. This should be made clear and unambiguous city policy. Parks should be refuges from this type of hectic commercial activity. In addition, it must be made clear that advertising in any form should be banned from city parks, regardless of what it is called. Merely calling such signage by another name, like government speech, does not alter the fact that it's still advertising. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ryan Brooks, Barry Kennedy, and Dennis Hathaway.
Councilmember Ryan Brooks, representing CBS Outdoor. We've heard a lot of testimony today, and people talked about blight. But the real blight in this city is the 14% unemployment rate, the deterioration of our parks, the lack of revenues and funds for our firefighters and police officers. And what we're trying to do in this ordinance has nothing to do with that. One, this ordinance actually asks to reduce the number of signs in the city. There's opportunities to create revenue streams for the city while believing in the goals that the city has laid forth. We're hoping to work with the city council, hoping to work with the public. We've been through this for about 2 or 3 years. Yeah, it's not a perfect document, but it's a pretty good start. I think the city council has done a great job in giving direction. I think the staff has done a great job also in creating the framework of that direction. We do ask for about 30 days to work out some of the issues, and I encourage the public also to truly read the document. Some of the things that you heard today aren't even included in the draft of this ordinance. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Barry Kennedy, and then we have Dennis Hathaway, and then Andrew Kugler. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Beverly Kenworthy with Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, representing over 1,600 businesses with 750,000 employees. Just quickly, some points. We think there's some outstanding issues. We need some more clarity on the sign reduction program and how that's going to work, issuing certificates of compliance for existing billboards and displays, and also instituting an alternative appeals process for on-site specific appeals. I'd also like to talk about the grandfathering issue. We really believe that this should become effective once the ordinance is established. Businesses need certainty, and the projects that this could delay, I think, is in terms of job creation and the problems that we're having here in the city, I think right now is just unconscionable. We are concerned on some of the on-site issues with the word of exclusively in the definition, which we believe limits the language, which states any portion of which.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Cross promotion.
Thank you so much for writing. Thank you so much. Dennis Hathaway, Kugler, and then Richard Spicer.
Good afternoon. Dennis Hathaway with the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight. The community benefits option drives a stake right through the heart of billboard reduction because that is what applicants are going to opt for. And I want to display some billboards that won't be coming down if you go for allow this community benefits option. Here's one in Council District 1. It shows about 5 different people blasting away with guns. Happens to be right across the street from a school. Here's one in Council District 2. This is on the roof of a building, a restaurant. It's advertising a strip club. Here is one in Council District 14. This is advertising Tecate Beer. It happens to be on the same property as another billboard advertising a gambling casino. So that's a low-income community where ads for alcohol and gambling are being pushed. This is blight. This is something you could have gotten rid of. If you go for the community benefits package, that's out.
Thank you very much. Andrew Kruger, Richard Spicer, and Ann Williams.
Good afternoon. Andrew Kugler with the Mayor Brown Law Firm here today on behalf of Summit Media, LLC. My comments today are limited to just keeping on your radar an amendment we suggested at the August hearing. As the city knows, there's a significant number of both off-site and on-site signs that are legally constructed but vary in some small way from their permit. In most cases, these are just an innocent oversight and have never really been the subject of any community concern. We respectfully submit that the ordinance be amended to deal with these minor noncompliances through an appropriate adjustment process. The city has limited enforcement resources, and we've seen in the past that orders to comply, even for minor noncompliances, are vigorously contested, so this amendment really makes sense from the city's standpoint. I'll note in closing that there seems to be consensus on this amendment. At the last hearing, the department agreed it was necessary, and the report today suggests that they're still working on it. We appreciate all their hard work and all your hard work, and we look forward to language. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Richard Spicer. Good afternoon, sir. Ann Williams, Barry Johnson.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Spicer. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council. Formal remarks. Each one of you at this table received the long version. They supplement what we did 2 years ago. You also got a community impact statement that summarizes those. You've heard a number of reasons for opposing. This neighborhood council unanimously opposed for many of those same reasons. On the other hand, we do support creating a special unit from independent funding that would give them an opportunity to address those 4 issues. Last time there were 9 issues. I don't know what happened to those. Are they going to be addressed? Our neighborhood council did a study of all the signs of pictures, statistics, everything in our area. We have asked Building and Safety on their survey. We gave it to them. What's legal, what's not legal? Cannot hear from them. Why not? Because they're in litigation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ann Williams, Barry Johnson, and Sarah Meltzer.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association. Several of our concerns have already been addressed in the latest draft ordinance, so I also know that a lot of our members have weighed in independently with their specific issues, so I'm just going to highlight a few remaining concerns. First, we still feel the proposed minimum size of the SUDs is too large. A minimum of 15 acres limits the ability to be flexible about where SUDs would enhance the urban experience, and we feel this is particularly true in a dense area such as downtown, where it's difficult to organize the disparate ownership of such a large area. The city's general policy is that the standard size for most SUDs is 3 acres, and we feel that signage SUDs should not be treated differently than other SUDs. Second, we feel that the draft ordinance is overly restrictive in limiting the possible sites for SUDs. While we agree that not all parts of the city are appropriate locations for an SUD, we feel that neighborhoods and council members should have greater access to signage as a community planning tool. Finally, we all know that this economic downturn is relentless, and now more than ever, it's critical that businesses and developers are able to utilize
Thank you, ma'am. Barry Johnson, Sarah Melzer, and Nancy Friedman.
Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder. I oppose the grandfathering of the 10 additional sign districts, many of which are completely surrounded by single-family homes, like the NBC Universal sign district. There are homes 360 around in the Hillside. These homes would be greatly affected, and I think they should not be grandfathered, and it needs further protection for single-family homes in any future sign district. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So Mauser, we have, after Ms. Mauser, we'll have Nancy Friedman, Marilyn Crowell, and Samantha Martinez. Good day.
My name is Sarah Melzer, and I speak as a resident and as an educator. I'm very troubled by the long-term impact of the current sign ordinance, which does not adequately protect the community. We are all educated not just in the classroom, but also in everyday life through signs such as billboards that encircle us. What is the ultimate message of these advertisements? It is that our self-worth and happiness are reduced to dollar signs, our ability to buy products and services that we lack. This message is presented on billboards so pervasive and so gigantic that they block out alternative realities and they block out LA's beauty. Very literally, they block out the natural and free sources of our happiness, the sky, mountains, trees, and the architectural interest of buildings. And figuratively, they shrink our worldview so that everything is reduced to money, money, and money.
Thank you very much. Nancy Friedman, Marilyn Crowell, and Samantha Martinez.
Good afternoon, Nancy Friedman, Brentwood Community Council. I can't help but paraphrase a verse from Simon and Garfunkel's tune, Feeling Groovy, from the 60s when all you guys were born. Slow down, don't move so fast. You want to make this ordinance last.
I can hear it.
Give me more time. Please.
I'm going to follow the bouncing ball.
Okay.
Right?
Please appreciate the studious citizens who are not paid and have been working and researching for the right balance in this voluminous sign ordinance for weeks on end, day and night. Please bring the ordinance back to the CPC. Let the people who will be affected by this have their voices heard, not merely one-minute rushed sound bites. BCC is on record via letters for many things that we would like, considering a moratorium on new digital, no benefit packages, and not to rush the process. I don't want to read Goodnight Moon to my grandchildren by the light of a digital sign outside the window.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Do I get 2 more minutes?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Marilyn Krell. I am president of South Brentwood Residents Association, who we represent about 3,000 homeowners and renters in South Brentwood, and I promise I will not sing. Well, we would like to see a moratorium on the electric and digital signs until a properly researched ordinance can be drafted. We really want to know why the work of the City Planning Commission was so drastically changed by the City Planning Department. How can the first ordinance of 2009, which seemed to satisfy both community activists and lobbyists for sign companies and businesses, be so corrupted in the new ordinance? Please take the time to provide a plan that respects the quality of life for all Angelenos. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha Martinez, Alan Mogia, and Carol Brusha, and then we'll have Laura Silagi. Good afternoon.
Hi, Samantha Martinez. I won't sing either, although Lisa offered me $5 to sing. I represent the Greater LA New Car Dealers Association, and we've been part of the on-site sign coalition that's been meeting with staff and with the members, and we really appreciate all your time. The one thing that is new to us and that we have concern about is the new definition of on-site sign and off-site sign. These were not discussed in the several meetings that we've had and the meetings that the public hearings, and we have a great concern about there are potential lack of ability to do cross-promotion. The new language for on-site and off-site signs is extremely restrictive, and so I have a suggestion here that I'll pass out with potential language for addressing this. We think that that was not the intended, what the staff intended to do, but the language is very exclusive and won't allow us the opportunity to try to get folks to come into our shops to test drive a car with some cross-promotion. So we think the language could be clearer.
Thank you much. Al McGill, Carol Brusha, and Laura Silagi. Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Al Moja. I oppose this sign ordinance in the sense that it allows signage in our public parks. There's one place that we should be free from advertising, and that is our public parks. People go there to relax and get a different environment. Seeing a sign completely obliterates the basic fundamental concept of public parks. I'm sure if you was to poll their constituents, you'd find overwhelming objections to allowing signings in our parks. It just doesn't really belong. People have the need to be free from intrusive advertising, and I hope you pass on to the City Council the need not to oppose signage in public parks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Carol Fisher, Laura Silagi, then Steve Sand, then we'll have Janet Dotson.
Good afternoon, Carol Bruchet. My husband and I were in Chicago last week for 7 days as tourists, and we explored every part of the city that we could, which included almost every inch of Grant Park, which also contains an area known as Millennium Park. There is no advertising, and the various areas the park encompasses look great. Because of what is happening here in Los Angeles over the use of advertising space, I was very aware of how beautiful the Chicago park system is. They are peaceful, open spaces that give the feeling of spaciousness, even though one is surrounded by tall buildings. There are other parks around Lake Michigan that provide respites, even though traffic surrounds them. My husband said Chicago is one of the most visually pleasing cities he has seen. I hope those of you who are charged with helping to make Los Angeles a better place will take into consideration how important it is to have some beauty. Putting up advertising will definitely not be an enhancement.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Silagi. I am part of the Venice Community Coalition. Follow the money. The Valley Industry Commerce Association and Latham and Watkins and others who are paid to prowl the corridors of City Hall and buttonhole decision makers have already corrupted the Planning Commission's work. For example, Latham and Watkins spent $1 million in the first half year of 2011 on lobbying. It produced detailed rewrites of the draft sign ordinance. At the same time, it represents AEG, owner of LA Live and the Staples Center, as well as the Dodgers, NBC Universal, among others. It also represents Clear Channel, an international billboard company. All of them are set to gain from the new provisions in the draft sign ordinance. I am one of the 99%, and they represent the 1%. And I want to know, who do they represent?
Thank you very much. Steve Sand, Janet Dotson, Tina Aguilera-Muller. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Stephen Sand. I'm the chairman of the Westwood Community Council. A lot of people in the audience feel that this is just a show because the decision has been made. I sincerely hope that isn't the case. I think what you've seen before you today is an extremely broad citywide coalition from the east side to the west side, from the valley to the Hollywood to the harbor. Citizens in this community are deeply concerned about this ordinance, and we ask you, and I reiterate, please send this back to the City Planning Commission for your process. I heard several representatives from the industry say they want an ordinance, they don't want a lawsuit, and if this does not go back to CPC and follow the process dictated by our city procedures, you are just inviting a lawsuit. I have to specifically address the issue of the findings and the failure of the findings to address and consider the impacts on residential neighborhoods of these sign districts. That is a serious flaw that must be addressed. I ask you, and I join with so many other of our citizens citywide, please send this back to CPC so we can get an ordinance that the community and the industry can support.
Thank you. I just wanted, for the record, it's stated Ms. Dotson declines to speak, so I respect that. Ms. Dotson, okay. Tina Aguilera-Muller? She left. Steven Resnick? Barbara Boyd? Douglas Arsenault? And Dr. Stanley Moore. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. Stephen Resnick, President of the Westwood Homeowners Association, and also Secretary of the Westwood Neighborhood Council. Both of these two groups represent many thousands of citizens on the west side and are on record as opposing this ordinance for many of the reasons you've already heard. I'd like to make two comments. It wasn't that long ago that it was proposed that Holmby Park be turned into a big advertisement for Warner Brothers at a giveaway price, and many of us opposed that and successfully stopped it. And I would also add that in Alan Bell's comment and your comment, sir, about the 20 motions that have been introduced that and city staffing problems and budgetary, it reminds me of what my mother always used to say, that it isn't a bargain if you can't afford it. And I think the city can't afford this ordinance as written. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Barbara Boyd, Douglas Arsenault, and Dr. Stanley Moore. Good afternoon,
Barbara
ma'am.
Brody, Westwood South of Santa Monica Boulevard. Homeowners Association and our West Side Neighborhood Council also voted to oppose this ordinance as currently written. I'm not going to follow my remarks because I was struck by a huge irony today as we were listening to the presentation from planning, and that is when we look back to what the root of some of our problems with signage, go back to the legal challenges that were brought against the city sign ordinance in its attempt to levy a $300 and something inspection fee on billboards annually so that the city could catalog, inventory, and monitor them. Here we are today. Those regulations were posed by the billboard industry in court constantly, over and over. It's unreasonable, it's terrible, it's awful, we shouldn't have to pay these things. Now we're talking about a voluntary trust fund to do the research necessary to regulate the industry that doesn't want to pay the fees so that they could properly be regulated by the government, whose role it is to protect the public safety and health. These signs are distracting. They bother the health. They bother the community character. The on-site digital signs must be stopped today.
Thank you much. Douglas Arsenault, Dr. Stanley Moore. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, council members. My name is Doug Arsenault of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, representing more than 360 businesses in the city and surrounding areas that have created over 100,000 jobs. The sign industry is an essential part of the Los Angeles economy, with more than 6,000 companies in the community using outdoor advertising, including the entertainment industry, local small businesses, consumer goods manufacturers, retailers, and others that have created jobs for the 99%. Or more correctly, 84% due to unemployment. VICA wishes to thank the planning department for undergoing the seemingly insurmountable process and their willingness to work with the signage industry. However, VICA has 4 outstanding concerns. Number 1, the size and location requirements for sign districts are still too restrictive and limit the flexibility necessary to enhance dense areas, as well as areas abutting freeways as are common in the valley. Number 2, the new definition of on-site signs requires content to be exclusively concerning its business, which eliminates the ability for cross-promotion.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Stanley Moore, Sharon Kaiser, then Lane Lawson. Okay. David Garfinkel and Robert Portillo. So Dr. Stanley Moore, Sharon Kaiser, Mr. Lawson, and Mr. Garfinkel.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am.
Sharon Kaiser of Paramount Pictures, and thank you for your patience today. Paramount is the last major studio in Hollywood. We've been at our property for 90 years, and we are here today asking that you consider continuing the grandfathering date to today's plum date. Paramount has filed an application for a major master plan, long-term plan for our property. It represents significant investment in our property. It would be a 25-year plan. It would bring 12,000 jobs to the city. And part of that component would be signage, as is typical of a major studio facility. So we ask for this today. The language as proposed would preclude us from even processing our signage through the public review process, either as a specific plan or as a sign use district. So we ask for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Mr. Lawson, Mr. Garfinkel, and Mr. Portillo.
Lane Lawson, Director of Public Affairs for Clear Channel Outdoors, Southern California. Since opening our doors in Los Angeles almost a century ago as Foster and Kleiser, Clear Channel Outdoor has consistently sought out ways to be a strong community partner. whether it's providing affordable advertising opportunities to help large or small businesses alike, or donated advertising space to local nonprofit groups, law enforcement, or governmental agencies to reach the community with vital information, we are committed to the City of Los Angeles. Annually, Clear Channel Outdoor donates more than $6 million in advertising space to these groups. We've worked with groups such as Habitat for Humanity, AIDS Project Los Angeles, Minorities in Broadcasting, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and many others. Clear Channel Outdoor remains committed to the City of Los Angeles and is willing to work on developing a comprehensive solution to regulate outdoor advertising that will benefit everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Garfinkel, Mr. Portillo, good afternoon.
Dave Garfinkel, President of the Tarzana Property Owners Association. We have submitted a detailed letter. It was emailed out and passed out today. I'll just hit a couple of highlights. A lot of this has already been covered by other people. We are opposed to the ordinance as currently written. It has a number of serious flaws. Let me just mention a couple. We're opposed to the grandfathering of special sign districts. We failed to see any justification for the comprehensive sign program. The planning department says it's mostly for college campuses, museums, stadiums, etc., but the ordinance is clearly meant for excessive signage in commercial areas. We don't understand at all the elimination of the right of private action. The city has a well-documented inability to initiate legal action in a timely manner, exasperated by the current budget situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Portillo, De Castro, and Charles Porter. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Robert Portillo, 16th Place Neighborhood Association. The 16th Place Neighborhood Association wants to express our objection to the proposed grandfathering, and we would strongly recommend you remove the Midtown SUD off the attachment. Unlike any other neighborhood in the Mid-City area, the 4500 block of West 16th Place is now confronted with an imposing and visually offensive slab wall obfuscating our landmark views of the Hollywood Hills, the Foothills, the Hollywood Sign, and the Griffith Park Observatory. It has brought blight to our community and neighborhood. Allowing off-site signage at the Sim Lowe's Midtown Crossing site will only add insult to injury. Our property values are derogated. Noise pollution reverberates through the neighborhood. The heat emanates from the building. Considering the possibility of off-site signage would only make Venice Boulevard behind the building look like the Las Vegas Strip. More importantly, the signage proposed would be staring directly into our yards, advertising beaming directly to the residents of 16th Place.
Mr. Castro, Mr. Porter, Christina Spitz, and then Janet Turner. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan DeCastro. I'm the current president of Mid-City Neighborhood Council, where Robert lives. And we have the Midtown Crossing there, which Robert mentioned, and that's considered regional commercial, and it's applicable to this ordinance. Mid-City Neighborhood Council has not taken a position to support this as written. What we have done is extensive work working on the SUD. So I agree that it should not be included in this attachment. Actually, probably none of them should be, but I'm only going to speak for ours, which is Midtown. We'd like it removed. They came to us with a proposal for 24,000 square feet of signage on this building, and we have mitigated it down to about 10,000, but now we've got this ordinance could override it. So we want it back in the hands of the residential people and the consideration for the community. Robert's up, his whole neighborhood is up on a bluff or a hillside, and this building that came in, you might have seen it on TV or the news, it's completely obliterated the views of iconic scenery. Now they want to put billboards on the side of this wall that will advertise for the people who don't want to see it most of all.
Thank you very much, sir. Charles Porter, Christina Spitz, Janet Turner, and last but not least, Wade Hunter. Charles Porter, are you here? Christina Spitz? Come on up, sir.
Should I go?
Yes, please.
I'm Christina Spitz. I'm Vice President of the Pacific Palisades Residents Association, which was formed in 1958, represents thousands of Palisades residents with a mission to protect our coastal and residential areas and community resources. We are opposed to the ordinance as written. We appreciate the efforts of the planning staff. We think that we may get to a point, to paraphrase Councilman Koretz's deputy, where we could support it, but we're not, manifestly not there yet. We obviously request that this be remanded back to the CPC for further study. We're very concerned, as many others have already expressed, but I want to emphasize again, about the interior sign exception, creating signs that could be plastered all over our recreational facilities. We have 2 gyms in the Palisades where youth play. We're concerned about digital displays being put up on those signs as a result of that exception, and we ask that we urge you to please send this back to the CPC. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Janet Turner and Wade Hunter.
Janet Turner, Chair of Pacific Palisades Community Council. We have voted unanimously to oppose the sign ordinance as written. We have given you a matrix of 12 points that will easily tell you what our concerns are and give you suggestions on how to possibly change them. I'm going to just quickly mention 1 or 2. In consideration of a sign district, the ordinance's compatibility finding is, quote, other nearby signs, other elements of street and site furniture, and adjacent properties. It does not mention residential properties, and we ask that that be included. We also note that currently, as written, it says you can either have a reduction of signs or a beautification program. We say you need to have both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Last but not least.
Thank you. My name is Wade Hunter. I'm a member of the Granada Hills North Neighborhood Council. On September 26th, the Granada Hills North Neighborhood Council approved the following motion: that the GHNNC submit the following comment to City Council Planning and Land Use Management Committee. We think that the sign ordinance should be further revised to address the following issues: signage in parks and public open spaces, regulation of electronic signs that are visible from public right-of-way or private property, regulating the size and brightness of signs on buildings, and regulating signs that negatively impact traffic. In order to address these issues, we support a moratorium of this ordinance until these amendments are adopted. And on a personal note, Councilman Reyes, you asked the presenter, had public input being properly taken. The man answered for 5 minutes and didn't answer your question, and I think you've heard from all of us, you need more public input. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. That concludes the public comment. I want to thank you for your patience, and I apologize if I sound rude. I just wanted to get through the 1 minute, and I tried to be balanced in that approach. Again, do we have any more? One more? We closed the hearing, sir. Mr. Bralcourt? Did you put it in on time? Because it's just one? Okay, let's let them speak. There's only 3 of them. If there was 20, then we'd be having issues. Let's let all the 3 to come on in. It was after we closed it. Thank you, sir. Coming up, gentlemen, we have Ralph Croy, Marcia Hoscom, and Frank Tyson. Come on up. These are the last 3.
Yes, my name is Ralph Croy.
These are really, really, really the last, right?
I'm opposed to the sign ordinance as written. I see no provision for political signs. I'm not speaking of commercial signs. I'm speaking of signs that express a feeling, thought, or about operation of government or corporations. For instance, like the signs that they have on the lawn, these people are expressing their opinion, and that to me is a political sign. The present ordinance, as expressed by Building and Safety personnel, requires a pole or monument sign permit reviewed, and signed by a professional engineer. This is not a real First Amendment immediate right. In some places, with area-specific rules, no pole sign is permitted, like in Granada Hills. Signs must also have reasonable size, 20 square feet, may not be adequate for...
Thank you, sir. You can close that thought. You want to finish that sentence? Pardon? Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker. Coming up, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good
afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Marcia Hanscom. I live in Playa del Rey, and I'm representing here the Coastal Law Enforcement Action Network, CLEAN, Wetlands Defense Fund, and the Biona Institute. We have submitted to your staff today the recommended language regarding wetlands, scenic coastal areas, and state parks and state ecological reserve areas, and we hope that you will send that language to the city attorney to make sure it's strong enough. But more than that, we think that this whole thing needs to be really addressed first and foremost by the city attorney. The last meeting, we were told by city attorney staff that what you had before you was not the language that was presented to the city attorney's staff, and that they, all of a sudden, there was sort of a bait and switch here. And we think that given the litigation history and the things that are at risk here for the city, that the city attorney's office really has to have a major look at this. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, I live in Sherman Oaks, but I have a business in Palm Springs, and I drove here today from Palm Springs, so I feel strong enough about this. I've lived here for about 50 years, and I remember at one point we came close to outlawing billboards altogether in Los Angeles. Instead, the city's gotten uglier and uglier. Every time I travel to see other cities, I was in Boston just now, and there's these strange signage. Here we have drugstore signs that cover the whole building. I forgot which drugstore, that's how much I've repressed it. Anyway, I think you want to be proud of your city, and it's up to you to really give the leadership. You want the city to become more beautiful. You also want to stand up for the people and not for the big interest. Because this city can be a beautiful city. It used to be a beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that does conclude public comment. Mr. Bell, do you need a drum roll? Have you come on up? Colleagues, we've heard a lot of perspectives, opinions. The last couple kind of struck me in terms of bait and switch. There's this notion of a bait and switch of documents. Can you speak to that? Because it's on the record, and I want to make sure you address that.
Ken Fong, Deputy City Attorney. I don't recall any comments like that. I'm normally the one that's here on sign-related matters. And just to clarify, I have been working informally with planning in the preparation of the draft sign ordinance, but it has not formally been sent to my office. And after that happens, then we will review it for form and legality, and it will go to either back here or it will go to the full city council.
So I guess that addresses the notion that we had a document that was legal in nature that was being developed, and somehow it changed, and now we have this. You're saying that's not...
Yeah, I think at any given time we only have one working draft. It evolves over time, but there's not multiple versions.
Okay. I just want to respond to what was stated on the record, and I thought that was important. Mr. Bell?
Yeah, I would also like to add that every version of the draft ordinance we post on our website, we make a point of mailing these versions to all the neighborhood councils and other stakeholder groups. So we're doing our best to keep this as open and transparent and getting all the revisions out in a timely manner. I mean, you will know, for example, that this last version of the ordinance was in strikeout and underlined format, so people could very clearly see the changes in this version from the version that we submitted on July 22.
So
there's been no bait and switch.
Okay. And then there was a 5-minute response that was no response. That was asserted. I want to beat a dead horse here, but in Planning Commission, a document surfaced as a result of all those public comments. There was a draft that was written, and what was generated from that draft, what we see here today, is an evolution of different levels of input by the staff and the assistance of the city attorney to see what we see today. Would that be accurate?
That's very accurate. I mean, that is the process for drafting an ordinance as complex as this. We consult very, very closely, again, on an informal basis with the city attorney's office. They have at least 2 attorneys who are working on this. We consult with the fire department. We consult with Building and Safety, which is the agency responsible for enforcing this, to make sure that they can, in fact, enforce these regulations. We do review all the public comments, and those that we think have merit, we address, and we will include it in a revised version.
Thank you, Mr. Brambila. Colleagues, questions, issues you want to raise as a result of the hearing, or any other concerns you might want to put on the table?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, the ordinance currently does not allow for any signage on parks.
What I would recommend, and this is in response to some of the hearings, is that we receive today a very clear direction to take off the table off-site signage in city parks and also city facilities pending further review. Yeah. So I would recommend that we clarify that it not only be taken off the table in terms of the sign program, the comprehensive sign program, but also let it be clarified that the interior sign exception could not be used as a loophole to permit that kind of signage. So if we were to receive that direction today, we would go back and make it clear that no aspect of the ordinance would be allowed to allow that particular kind of signage until a more thoughtful, deliberate process can be gone through to address this particular issue. Right. So we would amend the ordinance accordingly, all of the provisions of the ordinance.
Thank you. And I think we gave that as a committee as direction the last time we were here. And
Actually, the committee's single, very concrete, specific direction was relative to community benefits. I do not believe we received specific direction on parks, but based upon the tenor of the hearing and our reading of the committee's sentiment, we provided that language. What we're asking today is a definitive direction, and our recommendation would be to tighten up all the different provisions of the ordinance, including the interior signs and sign program.
Gotcha. I think I would certainly want to make that recommendation, and when the chair returns, and if it's concurrence of the committee, I would certainly want to ask you to give a full review of the ordinance so that all loopholes that where the possibility exists to put place advertisements, as we know them, or signs, whatever, our intent to get on parks, that we close those up, and that's not possible. I think that would be the direction of the committee if we all could agree to that afterwards. That's one. Second, on the credits, I'm not sure we're creating more problems for ourselves as a city. It seems like the credits will be given to landowners when we remove signs. And I know here in committee, and this is more of a land use issue, so we think about, okay, well, the signs, they run with the land, et cetera, but isn't it the sign company, the one that's responsible for the signs, and aren't there contractual obligations between the landowner and the billboard company? And how does that work for us now to give credits to the landowner to say, hey, you'll get some credits if you remove signs, as opposed to the billboard company?
Yeah, I understand the question. We've had a lot of discussions with the city attorney's office and also the staff in the planning department who have experience administering sign districts. And you're right to point out that we have a property-based zoning and land use management system. Our recommendation is to assign the credits for taking down a sign to the property owner, but to enable the property owner to sell or transfer those credits in exchange for the rights to put up a new sign. Now, it's a little complex because typically the property owner will not only own the land, but will own the buildings and all the structures that are on that land, and then will lease that out. I understand it operates a little bit differently with sign companies, and that there are lease arrangements and contracts that would assign technical ownership of the sign structure, which sits on a small parcel of land that is actually leased from the property owner. What we don't want to be put in the position, the planning department staff is having to figure out who owns the sign, because it's not a matter of public record. It is a matter of public record based upon the assessor who owns the property. It's not a matter of public record who owns a sign. That is a function of a contract that the city is not a party to between the property owner and the sign company, and if we get it wrong, there can be serious consequences. So, again, it would impose, we feel, a heavy administrative burden to have staff review these leases and these contracts to figure out and make a call as to who's the owner. That's not our job. So again, in consideration of keeping this simple, not to invite the kind of litigation that has transpired to date, I think there have been 3 lawsuits about this issue, about who gets the credits. I think it's much more advantageous to assign the credits to the property owner. We would record those credits on ZEMAS. Again, one of the report back items was putting all the off-site signs on ZEMAS, and we can in fact do that. Just in furtherance of that, if a sign then comes down, then we would show on the property that, in fact, a sign has been taken down and then credits are established. There's nothing that in the ordinance that we've drafted that would prevent transactions to be negotiated between the property owner and the sign company as far as those credits. But at the end of the day, anything that goes on a property is ultimately responsibility of the property owner. Demolition permits, land use regulations, ultimately it all comes down to the property owner.
And then in Hollywood, the sign district there, the credits were given to the sign company, correct?
It was ambiguous. My understanding is that the planning staff gave it to whoever applied first, whether it was the sign company or it was the property owner. And as a result of that, there was a dispute between the sign company and the property owner as to who got the credits, and I think the judge ended up doubling up the number of credits that would otherwise be allowed, and therefore cut in half, and by doing so, double the amount of signage that would be allowed.
Gotcha. And so I'm just concerned that we may be creating more problems for ourselves there, more litigation, quite frankly, as we try to sort that out. But I guess offline I could further speak with you about this and see how that may work.
I mean, obviously that's our intent, is to not create those kinds of problems, not create that kind of litigation, to have a system that would allow a market in the sale and transfer of these credits to emerge without overburdening the planning staff, making the wrong call in terms of who owns the sign, and it'd be a very open and clear and transparent process if it's assigned to the property owner.
Great, thank you. My final question right now is on the on-site digital conversions, and we don't have anything in this ordinance that mentions that, correct?
Are you speaking with respect to off-site or on-site signs?
On-site signs.
Correct.
It's silent. Correct. And at some point, we do need to address that, correct?
We would absolutely recommend that this issue be addressed. It's a complex issue with the technology, spacing, impacts on the visual environment. Absolutely, it's not something that we were able to address in a very forthright manner in this regulation, but we would recommend that it be added to the future work program of sign unit.
Okay. If I could if you could get back to us on a timeline for us to do that, and when you think that would be possible, and when that may come to us.
Again, our recommendation is to address all of these issues holistically. I think, again, there are like about 20 motions that are looking at substantive policy issues. There are pending court cases. Rather than separating them out as part of separate work program, our recommendation is to, quite frankly, bite the bullet, enable the department to be given the resources to address this in a forthright manner, add all of these issues, and then address them systematically with full public involvement and before the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, while you were out, I asked about signage at parks, and the suggestion was made that we give an overview of the ordinance to make sure that any loopholes that would allow for that, either to the interior signage component or the sign program, that we close those loopholes. And the suggestion was made by the planning department that we give that clear direction to them. to give that review. So I'm not sure. I'll wait for your direction, recommendation as to where we're going to go after today, but I want to make sure that whatever we do, that direction in there.
I appreciate that, Councilman Rizar, and I was hoping to make sure we listen to your concerns, my colleagues, and then we'll tie this up. And if you want to go any further or a different direction, it's up to you. But, Councilmember, but we will do that. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First couple. Well, let me say a general comment first. This is one of a handful of issues I think that people feel most passionately about in this city, and the people who came here to testify, I think, are representative of the degree of passion that is felt over this issue. And on the other side, the business community, feels very forcefully about the importance of this advertising medium, and was here also testifying on behalf of those issues. And yet, throughout this almost 2-hour hearing, this has been one of the most respectful and substantive discussions by everyone that I think we've heard on an issue of this controversy. And I want to say that that's a tribute to the work that has been done over the course of years, I think, to try to grapple with these issues. And I really want to compliment our staff for having gotten us to that point and for having really been respectful, I think, to everyone's concerns, and for trying to reach a resolution that, as best we can, accommodates the many, many different issues that are involved in an issue of this complexity. And I also want to really tip my hat to everyone who spoke, because this was very thorough, very substantive discussion, especially given the fact that you only have a minute to speak. I think everybody really got a lot in, and we even had musical accompaniment, so that was even better still. But I also heard through the course of this public comment that there's a number of fairly significant open issues that I think everyone feels still need to be addressed. And Mr. Huizar mentioned one that's very important, of course, the impact on parks, what the nature of the interior sign exception is, what in fact is an interior versus exterior sign, how that's defined. And there are a number of others. This issue of who should get the sign credit. I understand what you're saying about the difficulty that is presented to city staff in trying to administer the program if the credit is given to the sign company. But on the other hand, I think I heard pretty clearly that the program will be much more effective in implementing actual takedowns, which is the point of the credit in the first place, to encourage takedowns of signs that exceeds new signs going up. The program will likely be more effective if the sign companies who own the existing sign are able to consolidate those credits so that they can, in fact, take down many signs. That would be more effective than if the landowner has the credit. The issue of the ALJ procedure, I thought, is interesting and has merit as something that we should explore, and I understand that's one of the multiple open issues that you're proposing that we hold separate as we move forward with this. But on the whole, I think there are enough issues here that have been raised today and that staff has raised that I think I would prefer to have some of these issues better fleshed out before we move forward today. I would like to see, Mr. Chair, my suggestion would be that many people said that we should send this back to the Planning Commission, and I think, while I respect that view, ultimately we are the decision makers on this. These are policy questions that we're going to have to make. But I do think that it's very important that now that we have a proposal that's before us, the public has had an opportunity to see it briefly, but we have stacks and stacks of comments still to be taken into account. I would prefer, and I'll look forward to hearing your suggestion. But my preference would be that we continue this, that we not move it forward until we've had an opportunity to more fully discuss these here in committee over the next 30 days or so. So that would be my first suggestion, that we allow both the opponents of the ordinance and those who would like further revisions from the business community, those who have commented that there's some unintended consequences about some things that have changed since the Planning Commission proposal. I'd like to wrestle with those a little bit more in this committee and actually develop some answers to that. Had a great deal of discussion about the grandfathering impact. I want to ask a couple of questions on that. First, is it the case that if a project is considered grandfathered under one of these lists, that would still have to go through the regular sign approval process that would include our ordinary land use procedures? In other words, there's no guarantee that any provisions would be provided to a grandfathered project. We could, if we chose to, impose whatever conditions on a sign district that we wanted, whether or not they're grandfathered. Is that not correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So on a case-by-case basis, an individual project could come here, and the condition for approval could be full compliance with the new ordinance, whatever that turns out to be.
As far as what regulations would be imposed as a result of enabling a sign district to be established in the first place. But there might be instances, for example, we're recommending that we limit where you can have a sign district so that we don't cover the whole city with a sign district to, for example, downtown and regional centers and regional commercial areas. So there are some sign district applications that fall outside those boundaries. There are some sign district applications that don't meet our recommended minimum size requirements of 15 acres or 5,000 linear feet of street frontage. They don't meet those. So if the new rules were applied to those districts, they wouldn't even be eligible to apply, period. We wouldn't be able to process them or approve them. So kind of splitting the difference, we would recommend allowing them to move forward in terms of those basic rules, but that as far as sign reduction or community benefits or whatever other method that the council or the decision maker decides to take to apply the worldwide rush test, they certainly would have absolute flexibility to make whatever conditions of approval that are deemed necessary and appropriate and prudent in accordance with City Council's policy on the matter. Does that answer?
It does. Thank you. And I think that the significant number of grandfathered I shouldn't make a judgment call, but the number of grandfathered proposals has obviously expanded, and I think whether or not it should be a part of our continuing discussion as if we choose to put this over for a period of time. I would hope that would be part of the more thorough discussion that we'll have. But when we do, I also heard members of the business community say that certainty is of great importance, and it is a little unfair to some of those who are working on major projects that our process is continuing to evolve, and they don't really know what ground to work on. And so I'm particularly sensitive to the example raised by Paramount, that here they are working on a major project. They think they know what the ground that they're working on, and then we're changing it on them. We could grandfather that, but still then require whatever conditions we wanted to impose upon them as they go through the ordinary process. Right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, it's a policy call in terms of where the council wants to draw the line on the matter.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, my proposal would be I would suggest that we hold this over for 30 days within committee, and I would also propose that the Paramount proposal be included within the grandfather list without prejudging whether or not, in fact, those grandfathered projects, should be a part of the final ordinance.
I strongly believe that this is not ready to leave Plum. This is not ready to go to council. I strongly believe that. I do feel we should continue that discussion here. There are loose ends we need to address and language we need to see. Perhaps the midpoint could be that we instruct them to start the draft of the ordinance, but it comes back here. And the issues that we see that need more attention and or crafting after we read through these documents, and after they have a chance to essentially work through this wordsmithing, if you will, and approaches, it gives us a way to take advantage of the time that we have. So it's kind of going halfway. We allow the city attorney to begin drafting the ordinance, we give that direction, it comes back here, knowing that we're going to be working this, and we'll have another bite at the apple, if you will.
Well,
so we'll have that discussion.
So, City Attorney, can I interject here for a second? It seems to me that you're still grappling with some fundamental policy issues, and I'm not sure it's productive to send me on my way and have me draft, what's going to be the final product to go to City Council when you're still grappling with some of these policy issues that you're going to want to give me direction on.
Look, I want to make this as efficient for you as possible.
I do too.
If that's how you feel, I'm fine with that. I have no, how can I put this? I don't have no real sense if it's got to be done tomorrow. That's not where I'm coming from.
Well, I don't think it's going to slow it down either way, because if I start work on my version of it, and then you make different policy directives, I'll have to start, make adjustments. So it's not going to make it much faster for me to start now anyway, I don't think.
Well, this is a team effort, so I appreciate the input.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm trying to do here is, well, let me just lay this out and then see where we take it. One is approve the recommendations of the Planning Department reports dated July 22nd, 2011 and October 5th, 2011. That's one. Another recommendation is approve the draft ordinance attached to the October 5th, 2011 Planning Department report, and request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance as to form legality, and that's what we're discussing right now.
Yes, exactly.
And then this, okay, we could, so let's just put that on the table, but that's out there. 3, instruct the Planning Department, with the assistance of the city attorney and the Department of Building and Safety, to report to Plum Committee with the recommended final revisions on brightness of digital displays, sign and adjustments for off-site signs, and violation appeal hearings, and provide these recommendations for incorporation with the city attorney's draft of the Sign Ordinance. So now we begin to drill down to some of the specific issues that I think are a big concern and that we're hearing through this hearing. 4, request the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to create a signage analysis, regulation, administration trust fund for the receipt, retention, and disbursement of gifts, contributions, and requests for the support of signage, analysis, regulation, and administration in the Planning Department, with all contributions exceeding $5,000 to be accepted by the council on behalf of the city, and all expenditures from the fund to be authorized by the council. And the 5th recommendation be to direct the Planning Department, with the assistance of the CEO, to prepare a report on the budget that would be required to establish and operate the proposed sign unit. So what we have here are parameters, a skeleton, if you will, of meeting on a trust fund, but more importantly, taking a step back to the previous conversation where the city attorney is essentially, I think he's consistent with your suggestion, Councilman Krikorian, that we allow this to sit here for another 2 weeks, 30 days. How much time do you need to?
Well, but
30 days? Go ahead.
Well, Chair, if I could interject,
yes.
What you're proposing and the recommendations is inconsistent with what Mr. Krikorian and the city attorney is requesting, because the first 2 points is actually asking the city attorney to go draft the ordinance, but keep these 4 pieces.
Well, that's right. And I was just...
What Mr. Krikorian was pointing, it was like there's... And even, I mean, to have so many people from throughout the city come testify on this one issue means that we still have our work cut out for us.
That's
that
right.
We can't just separate these 4 pieces. We have to keep the whole thing open, because
that's right. Because you only send it to me when it's done policy-wise.
And I'm fine with that. Again, I want to rush this. If I could have you support me on recommendations 3, 4, and 5 so that we can go down that road.
Yes, that's fine.
And then we hold the ordinance here for the discussions and the issues that were addressed by my colleagues. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I do. So you give yourself as much time as you need to complete your work and then transfer it to me.
And what's 3, 4, and 5 again?
3 is to instruct the planning department, with the assistance of the city attorney and the Department of Building and Safety, to report to Plum Committee with recommended final revisions on brightness of digital displays, sign adjustments for off-site signs, and violation appeal hearings, and provide these recommendations for incorporation with the city attorney's draft of the sign ordinance. 4, request the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to create a signage analysis, regulation, and administration trust fund for the receipt, retention, and disbursement of gifts, contributions, and requests for the support of signage analysis, regulation, and administration in the planning department, with all contributions exceeding $5,000 to be accepted by the council on behalf of the city, and all expenditures from the fund to be authorized by the council. And 5th, direct the planning department with the assistance of the CAO to prepare a report on the budget that would be required to establish and operate the proposed sign unit. So we keep the ordinance here, we have those discussions, we work this through, and we continue working with the staff, but on 3, 4, and 5, it lets us move forward on enabling and creating capacity within the department to deal with these issues that need to be essentially to keep that vehicle.
Council members, those recommendations that Councilman Reyes read, they're essentially the same recommendations listed on the report back section of the planning department presentation. They were just expanded upon, and the directives are more specific. But in essence, those are the issues that we're going to report back on November the 15th, and they're enumerated in the handout.
Yeah. So essentially, 3, 4, and 5 are set up a trust fund,
right,
give us a budget, and report back to us on these issues. But it's keeping the ordinance, we're not directing city attorney to draft anything until we have some more input from stakeholders in the next 30 days. I do have some items to include on the report.
That would be great. I'll also ask you for that.
Yeah. One is on the parks issue. I think that's not so much a report back, that's a direction.
Right.
To deal with any loopholes that you could foresee may create problems for that would enable putting up signs at our parks. That's direction. That's not a report back. I do want to add to that 4 items that you had, 4 follow-up items. One is a report back on a timeline for on-site digital conversion, what type of regulations we could have for that. Number 2, on the credits, a report back. I'm not quite sure what's the better design to have, but should we have the credits be given to the landowner or the sign owner, and why are we doing one versus the other? That just needs further explanation. If we could have a report back on that. And the other is there's a 10% limit on off-site signage within supplemental use sign districts. I'm wondering if it's better to do it on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes, it could be less. It could be that, hey, there's too much exposure here, I think a case-by-case basis would be better. I'm not there yet. I just want to see what the pros and cons of are doing that, and why 10% to begin with. What's the basis for that? So we could have some explanation on that in a report back as well.
One final issue, I think, in order for the planning department staff to be able to make additional progress on the ordinance has to do with the whole issue of community benefits versus sign reduction. We had laid out 4 options. If the committee is not ready to make a decision about that today, I understand that, but it certainly would help move this process.
What I'd like to explore, Mr. Bell, is the potential for lack of a better word, is like a 2-tier, where we have around downtown the ability to look at different options. Given that downtown LA is unique in of itself, to provide that flexibility, to explore that, see if legally if it can hold, if it's consistent with the Worldwide Rush findings, if we can have a report back on that, and that way we can get to that discussion of do we want to take it that direction or not. Would that help you?
Happy to do that. Certainly for downtown, I think within our zoning code we have many different kinds of special rules that only apply to downtown. We typically carve that out separately from the rest of the city, so we can certainly come back with some recommendations that would treat the special case of downtown in the same way that we treat downtown, especially in terms of adaptive reuse, parking regulations, and so on and so forth.
Right.
On a citywide basis, again, I think that many different options that are on the table. There's the Planning Commission recommendation. There's option on community benefits. I think it would help the planning department staff if we could get some direction in terms of what path to go down, and if we need to further refine that, then we can further refine that. But at this point, we have these global options, and until, again, we get some direction.
Option number 3 is where it seems to be most consistent in terms of the takedowns. Would that be accurate?
I believe it's certainly very consistent with existing policy, which is to have a minimum requirement for sign reduction, and then to fill in the difference with community benefits. That provides flexibility for different sign districts and different requirements, but it recognizes that for the sign districts that we have on the books today, they've all had sign reduction as a component of them.
Perhaps if we could...
so option number 3 would work.
Well, let me phrase it this way.
Right.
If we can have more analysis on what number 3 means for my colleagues, so that we can make an informed decision on that impact. It gives us something more to work with, if you will, if we can drill down a little bit more as to what that means.
I mean, basically, I think what would work would be to use option number 3, as we've laid out on our presentation, as the starting point on a citywide basis, and then option 4 for what we are calling the greater downtown area, as called out within the ordinance. And forgive me again for pressing the matter, but in terms of the issue of grandfathering, I think that at a minimum, if we are going to do grandfathering as laid out, that's fine, but I think we would need to very clearly state that at a minimum, the grandfathered projects would comply with the Worldwide Rush decision. And then it's a policy matter whether you would want to go further and say that whatever the ultimate package of sign reduction or community benefits is ultimately included in the ordinance, whether those would also have to comply with that. Again, that's a policy call.
Right, but in order for us to make that policy call, when the report back, if you can give us some examples of analysis, so that way we know what the impact is, what will be the end result, and given the options that are in front of us, if we can do that, I think that would help us out to continue working through this discussion on the ordinance.
Very happy to do that, and I just want to second Councilman Gregorian's analysis here, which is that this is enabling legislation. It's just setting up ground rules, and that every single one of these pending or new scientific applications will have to go through the usual process. And the usual process is public involvement, public notification, environmental review, CEQA compliance. The conditions can be negotiated at a time. The application is ripe for analysis. It has to go before the Planning Commission because each one of these are legislative actions, and then, of course, it has to go before PLUM, and then it has to go before the City Council. So there's a lot of latitude and flexibility. I don't know how productive it is to tie our hands entirely at this stage of the game, since ultimately all these have to go through the process. The question is, where do you want to draw the line from a policy standpoint and express the policy of the council relative to these different policy issues? So we're happy to come back with some recommendations relative to this.
Well, I do want to structure parameters for a discussion that allows us to have a give and take, and to provide the audience, the stakeholders, access to these discussion points so we can hear from them. And everything's done in the open, it's transparent, and that essentially we're being as factual as possible and following the best legal advice so we can be consistent with the findings of the court cases that we've been through. And that would be the goal of this committee.
I agree with that. I think we would probably need a little bit more time to work this all out. If PLUM is to take this up on November the 15th, that would give us probably just 2 weeks to turn this around and then get a report out that would enable the public a minimum, really a minimum of 2 weeks to respond. So
how much time do you suggest?
An additional 60 days. Okay. So to have it back on PLUM at the PLUM hearing in December.
A Christmas gift.
I don't know what that hearing date would be.
When would that be? I'll be out of the country in December. Part of it. I mean,
there we go.
I'm willing to have anybody else come.
Nice try. Nice try. You'll be here.
I knew that was going to happen. Anybody else going out of the country?
I don't know if a date certain has to be established today in this forum, but we would ask for if we could work this out with the CLA and the city attorney's office, and then.
But why don't you tell us in 2 weeks?
Come back in 2 weeks.
Come back in 2 weeks and give us an update. That way, everyone knows when to expect it. We can have it out there, and we can do this thoroughly.
I think that sounds like a great plan. We'll come back in 2 weeks.
And then we have to make on-the-spot decision at this point.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Chair, can I just make one clarification? I agree with everything that Mr. Bell said. I'm not sure that enabling ordinance is the correct term, because that implies that you don't otherwise have the authority, and this is a legislative act, and it's clear that you do.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Brown. So, colleagues, if I can get your support on 3, 4, and 5, we'll hold 1 and 2. The ordinance stays here. We wait for Mr. Bow to give us in 2 weeks a tighter schedule. Hopefully, we can have discussions on who's in town and who isn't, and maybe we have a Christmas gift. Are you guys okay with that?
I support that, Mr. Chair. The two things that I would add. We talked about this issue of credit and who it should go to. I don't know if it's so much a report back. My thinking would be that the easy thing to do would be to get this off the city's back entirely and put it on the landowner and the sign owner to decide. So have the sign owner apply for the credit. The sign owner who's going to take down the sign should apply for the credit under penalty of perjury. If there's a dispute between the landowner or another sign company or whomever about who actually is entitled to it, that's for them to resolve. That way the city is not in the business of having to parse it out. Have the sign company apply. The sign company gets the credit. If somebody else wants to sue the sign company, that's their issue. I think that would be in my view, that would be the simpler way to go with the takedown credit that would encourage the greatest degree of takedowns. And so that would be my recommendation.
I think that's a great suggestion, and we'll be happy to explore that option.
And on the grandfathering, have there been significant numbers of applications since the last plum hearing, or is Paramount the only one that would be impacted?
Is Paramount? There might be some others that we're not aware of. We would do additional research. I mean, we would probably recommend that in the next report back, the formal that we do an update in terms of those applications, so you have all the information before the committee.
Okay, so if we do that, if we put it off till then, we won't be limited in any way in what is either included or not included in making that grandfathering decision.
Right. I mean, we'll do the research. We'll review if there have been any additional motions that have been introduced or applications. We'll itemize those in our report back, so you'll have all the information available.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's 5:30 and not bad. We might make it just beyond the traffic hour. So it's pretty clear where we want to go. Mr. City Attorney, are we okay?
Yes. Our direction is clear.
Mr. Bell?
We have clear direction. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for hanging in there, guys, and I want to thank all the staff. I want to thank the audience for your patience, and we're going to try to make this as transparent as possible, so thank you so much. That being said, any other items? Oh, closed session. All right. Okay, you guys get to go home. Thank you. I'm sorry. They're going to give us, in 2 weeks, they'll come back with a definitive schedule. We already closed public comment for the next time. Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see.
Are we going to closed session now? Yeah. All right. We need to clear the All right, City Attorney Ken Fong, the Plum Committee met in closed session on the Summit Media litigation, and no action was taken.
Thank you. So that summarizes item number 4. We already had public comment. That being said, this meeting is adjourned.
All right. Finally.